This holiday, deck their countertops with peppermint white chocolate mochas, gingerbread lattes, and pumpkin cream cold brews. Ninja Luxe Cafe is the ultimate gift. It's the #1 best-selling espresso machine in the U.S., perfect for the coffee lovers in your life. If they can dream it, they can brew it. No skills needed. Espresso balanced. Drip coffee rich. Cold brew in a flash. Hands-free silky microfoam. Dairy or plant-based milks. Bring joy into their holiday and every day after with Ninja Luxe Cafe. Shop now.
Hey, warm up, brother, hello! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We're going to be joined in segment number 2 by one of our good friends, as Riley Frain. He does great work over at the Portal Report along with Mid-Major Madness. He's going to be joining me, and we're going to be chatting it up about what we've all seen here in the last few weeks of college basketball, some of the mid-major teams that have stood out to him. We're going to be diving in as well with regards to multi-team events that we're seeing, some of the big tournament games that he's going to be having his eye on for Tuesday and moving forward. And then in the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Tuesday. As we hit some bank shots, if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GUnit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via the 5-star review. And although I did not see any Twitter/X questions today on my old Twitter/X timeline, everything is powered by Better. That is BETR. Better is doing a tremendous job of making sure that you're able to get into the game. And with Better, all you need to do is go to BETR.app to be able to get into the game and type in the promo code of VSiNPod. That is VSINPOD. That gets you $10 free. All you do is pick a player, think whether or not they're going to go under their stats, points, rebounds, what have you, and boom, you're all good to go. And we're all good to go to take a look at what was a tremendous college basketball Monday. Let's take a look back at it, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
Saw some great action out there in lovely Las Vegas with Houston getting taken to overtime against Syracuse. Syracuse actually entered the day number 1 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Houston finds a way to persevere 78-74. The final is they were the better three-point shooting team. They go 11-27 from 3. Syracuse just 8 of 31. You saw the return of J.J. Starlin, goes 5 of 8 from the floor, supplies the team with 11 points. And for the Syracuse team, they played even up with the turnover battle, 13-13. Now Houston won the rebound battle 49-43, with Chris Senek being able to supply the team with 12 rebounds, and Emmanuel Sharp, he was sharp. He goes 6 of 16 from the floor, but 11 of 12 at the free throw line. And for Syracuse, 12 of 29 at the free throw line. J.J. Starlin was 0 of 3. William Kyle was 4 of 9. That's the only reason why they did not get a big giant win. For Iowa State, they just hold on. St. John's, if you took like the 2 to 2.5, you got there, but 83-82 the final in this one. As for Iowa State, 9 of 22 from 3-point range. Taban Lipsby, nice rock solid performance here. 5 assists. He was able to generate a steal, 16 points. Milan Mimosilovic, 23 points, 5 of 9 3-point shooting, but St. John's holds in there, even though they lose a rebound battle 38-36, as they went 23 of 30 at the free throw line. 10 of 10 for Bryce Hopkins, 16 points. Ozai Sellers was able to slide the team with 20 points, and for St. John's, they actually won the turnover battle 11-10, so good job taking care of the ball, even though they're still searching for that main point guard. But Zubi Ejiofor down low was rock solid once again, 16 points, 9 rebounds, so that was a really, really good one. This was just an absolute butt kicking. How about what we saw from Michigan, just absolutely blasting San Diego State, 94-54, and this was with Bagun Weth back in the fold for San Diego State. As San Diego State, 17 turnovers and 17 made field goals, and for Michigan, they go 11 of 33 from 3-point range. Yaxel Lundeborg, a nice workman-like 15 points, 6 boards, 4 assists. Off the bench, Will Shetter, he was able to go for 10 points for this Michigan team. They win the battle on the glass 49-34, and San Diego State, just not a lot doing for them in this game. Whole heck of a lot doing for Gonzaga, though. 95-85. They completely land-based Alabama. It doesn't sound like much, but giving up 85 points to Alabama, that's actually a pretty solid defensive effort. And for Gonzaga, they win the battle on the glass, 48-36. Big game here from Tyon Grant Foster along Graham Ike. Ike a double-double, 21 points, 11 boards. And then for Grant Foster, he was able to throw in there 21 points and 7 boards of his own. Just 6 of 22 from 3-point range for Gonzaga, but 4 of those made threes. The man of steel, Venters off the bench for 12 points, and for Alabama. They costed themselves at the free throw line. If you wanted them to cover 14 out of 23 at the charity stripe, that's not going to cut it. And Aiden Holloway, 13 points, but on 15 shots. LeBaron Filan tried to keep the team lively. He goes 11 of 18 from the floor. He was able to supply that team with 29 points. You saw a nice performance out of Louisville as they take it to Eastern Michigan. 87-46 the final. Louisville's actually a top 30 team. There's the points allowed on a per possession basis. We all talk about the offense, but in this game, they go 14 of 33 from 3, and they hold Eastern Michigan going 2 of 15 from the outside. And for Louisville, another nice performance out of Isaac McNeely. He was able to supply the team with 17 points. Mikael Brown down for his Sanders with 11 points, but they still win that game easily, and they're able to cover a big Mondo number. For Tennessee, they had a Mondo victory over Rutgers. How about 85-60 the final? They put up 56 points in the first half before things tamed down a little bit more in the second half, and I mean, it got very close with regards to total, but for Tennessee, they go 11 of 22 from 3. Jacoby Gillespie, who struggled a little bit with turnovers to begin the season, 6 of 10 from 3, 32 points. Nate Ament was able to go for 20 points, and for Rutgers, this was just a sloppy performance. They lose the turnover battle 14-13. They get blasted on the glass 43-28, so that was a little bit less than tremendous to say the least, and this was tremendous for Seton Hall. How about them taking it to NC State out there on the island, 85-74 the final is. For NC State, they go 8 of 24 from 3-point range, and for Seton Hall, they had A.J. Stanton McCray go off for 22 points in this one. Seton Hall entered into this game, by the way, 361st in the country. In terms of total possessions per game, they showed that they've got some range and versatility, and they did a nice job winning that battle on the glass 37-30. As for NC State, you did have Darian Williams supply 12 points, but just needed a little bit more down low out of this team, as Terrence Arsenault not scoring a single point. Gonna need a little bit more there as well. And Auburn, they were able to get more out of Todd Pettiford. He had been struggling a little bit coming into this game, but Auburn, they get the job done 84-73 over Oregon, as Oregon just 9 of 33 from 3. They've been pedestrian offense, and for Oregon, they actually win the battle on the glass 46-34, but for Auburn, despite going 5 of 23 from 3, he had Pettiford be able to lift them up. He scores 24 points, just 1 of 5 from 3-point range, but for Auburn, they do a tremendous job winning the turnover battle, 18-6, and that's been rough for this Oregon team. As Jackson Shell said, he only had 2 turnovers, but Takai Simpkins, he had 22 points, 4 rebounds, 7 turnovers, just not going to quite cut it there. And Illinois had a little bit of a scare for UET Rio Grande Valley, unable to cover a big number, 87-73. The final, the Vaqueros was able to hang in there. They go 11 of 26 from 3, just 8 of 30 for Illinois, but they did have Andrei Stojakovic supply 24 points. Tomislav Avicic still easing himself back in from injury, 10 points, 5 boards, so relatively pedestrian effort there, but a good effort out of them. And then if you're looking at more of the unranked teams that do have to do this with a few games that are raging on, and we just saw Arizona go final against Denver. If you took north of 30 with Denver, 103-73, they just barely get there. As for the Pioneers of Denver, they pioneer a cover going 9 of 24 from 3, and Arizona 12 of 20 from the outside. You had Koa Pete, well, he gave you 12 points, but Ivan Kirchkakov, hopefully I said that correct, he gave you 20 points, and Braden Burris, he was able to supply 20 points as well. But in terms of the unranked teams, very good performance out of Towson in the second half to be able to take it to Rhode Island. That was one of the first games that started the day, 62-55 the final. We'll be talking a lot more about these mid-major teams in segment number 2 with one of our good friends in Riley Frain. So I'm not going to go too much into these because this is going to be a very long podcast with how many games I have. This is probably going to be like a 3.5-hour podcast, but that's it. Very rock solid win out there. You did see Baylor be able to take it to Creighton, this by a count of 81-74, and for Creighton, just a case where they did not limit the Baylor 3-point shooting. Baylor goes 7 of 18 from 3-point range. You had Tonde Yusufu only supply the team with 11 points, but a big dunk at the end to be able to just put the stamp on this game. And for Baylor, they completely bludgeoned Creighton on the glass. Baylor had been struggling on the boards, but Cameron Carr was able to supply 9 rebounds, Dan Skillings 8 rebounds, and for Creighton, they do go 9 of 10 at the free throw line, but they just got out physical in this game, and for Creighton, they lost the turnover battle as well by a count 13-10. Your harebrained performance of the night comes from Central Connecticut, unable to cover the 3, but they win in overtime by a count of 108-106 against Seton Hall. You had Aaron Smith Jr. supply 38 points, Anquan Hill at 34 points. As for the Central Connecticut Blue Devils, they go 7 of 16 from 3, 13 out of 30 for Sacred Heart, so they were able to pioneer a cover out there. You saw UMass be able to take it to Oregon State by a count of 73-65 for Oregon State. They lose battle on glass 39-31, and for UMass, just 5 of 19 from 3-point range. You're not going to have their forte there, but won that turnover battle 16-11, so that was a nice solid win, and perhaps UW Green Bay should be playing all of their games over at Virgin Islands, as for Green Bay, they take down Iona 80-75. That's 3 straight covers for them at Virgin Islands, 4 straight covers overall. They go 10-28 from 3, so a team that was very, very much dog last season, and still not convinced that this team is necessarily going to be great, but man, they have looked a little bit better here in the last few days, so a little bit of a shout out to them. Bowling Green win but don't cover against Bucknell by kind of 71-66. Bowling Green has been a top 20 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. You saw a pretty impressive display. If you had a Rice +4, for me, I very much lamented this one. They covered the last 28 minutes of regulation, and then in overtime, they get outscored 6-1, 89-84 the final. That's a little bit of a rough one if you, like me, had Rice. But for Kennesaw State, you had Simeon Cottle be able to supply the team with 25 points, and Ramon Seals, he was able to give the team 25 points as well. And for Rice, 24 out of 38 at the free throw line. That is the reason why they do not get the job done out there. But being able to get the job done, SMU, they were able to take down Radford 89-72. They do not cover the big number, but Kevin Miller, he was able to give the team 25 points, 10 assists, so a nice performance out there. If you're looking at some late night action, Washington State was actually down 11 points in the second half to Division II Chaminade. Going to be interesting to handicap Chaminade's next 2 games after this, as they forced Washington State into 15 turnovers in the first half, 23 overall, but Washington State finds a way 90-85 the final, as Chaminade just 6-22 from 3. Kent King, he was the king of giving a double-double to Chaminade, 20 points, 10 rebounds, but off the bench for this Washington State team, they were able to get 61 out of their points. Every one of their starters, 6 points or fewer, but Ace Glass had 26 points, Raheed Varvers, 25 points, Emil Yaleo, he was able to supply the team with 10 points. They find a way to avoid a very embarrassing upset, and I was wondering if Troy was going to be a little bit tired after playing a triple overtime game against USC, a double overtime game against San Diego State, and it looked like they were Toledo, 75-68 the final, as Troy up 6 points in the half. They just ran out of gas in the second half. They go 5-28 from 3-point range, as Victor Valdez just 1 of 11 from the floor, and for Troy, they actually do a solid job in terms of winning the rebound battle 39-38, but for Toledo, they had on their side Sonny Wilson, and it was Sonny for him. He was able to supply that team with 21 points, and we've got just a lot to catch up on in general. We'll be talking more about these mid-major games with our good friend Riley Frain, and do want to just sort of cut it off here because, man, we've got ourselves a really long, about 3.5 hour podcast. But that said, if you're looking trend-wise at what we're getting in college basketball right now, this is with a few games pending still for Monday, because I have to have this up by midnight Pacific, so we still got action out there in Hawaii and lovely Las Vegas as I do this. But overall for the season, we have seen the overs hitting at about a 50.3% clip. Very equal split, 478 overs, 473 unders, and a few pushes. And the favorites on the spread are rating at about 49.3%, 467, 481, and 12 against the spread, as underdogs have really been able to reign supreme over the last week or so. And if you're looking at what we all got on Monday as I record, favorites have went 25, 23, and 1 against the spread, so they're having a relatively good time. And unders have been reigning supreme, 28 unders, 21 overs, and I believe that we might have a push in there as well. But that said, it's been a lot of fun looking at these tournaments, and we're going to continue to do so next with our good friend Riley Frain. He does great work over at Mid-Major Madness, and he joins me next right here on Kiska Zoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Are you looking to get an inside edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word, .com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. back your lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Eats Peterson, now part of the VC Family Podcast. Always a pleasure to be joined by this man as Riley Frain is doing such tremendous work over at Mid-Major Madness, taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. I know that he's been hard at work taking a look at all that we've gotten here in a wacky first few weeks of the season, the good, the bad, the ugly, and he's a man that is really dedicated to the sport all 12 months of the year because he did a great job of being able to analyze all that we got in the offseason with the portal report, taking a look at the over 2,500 transfers, so he knows things inside and out. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at his first and last name, Riley Frain. That's Frain on the last name. And Riley, it's great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Absolutely, Greg. Thank you for having me. That was quite the intro. It's always a pleasure to be here talking some college hoops with you. It's been a couple busy weeks with the season getting underway, traveling around, covering games, Mid-Major Madness, as you mentioned. Excited to get to talking, all about it with you here today.
Absolutely. And Riley, we are about 3 weeks through the season as we're recording this. And just what have you noticed here thus far this season that maybe has caught you by surprise? Because I think the biggest thing for me is it just feels like we've seen a little bit less defense than ever before. And these coaches that they always say, we want to run, we want to have pace and space and everything like that. It feels like they've really been carrying that out.
Yeah, I was also reading a couple statistics about how overall offensive production has been a lot higher. It seems like free throw rates are a lot higher, and that's sort of been indicative, another reason of why those offensive rates have gone up sort of across the country. I don't know if I necessarily have the reason why. I think we're seeing a lot more fast-paced basketball, a lot of high-scoring teams. Obviously, you look around the country, and it seems like that's sort of the focus of not only college basketball, but, pro basketball is high-scoring offenses, three-point shooting and all that. We looked across the nation and the landscape this offseason, and that was, the way a lot of big schools tried to improve. Of course, St. John's playing Iowa State as we record this, comes to mind. And one of the big things for Rick Pitino this offseason was, improve their roster from a three-point shooting standpoint. They went out and did that, bringing in a guy like Ian Jackson, who's known for his three-point shooting. Adding guys like Bryce Hopkins, of course, who's just an all-around really good, offensive talent. Adding a guy like Joe Sansanin from Arizona State, who was sort of known as a three-point shooting threat. I think he's shooting close to 50% to start the season on maybe 3 attempts per game, if I'm not mistaken. So, 100% correct, Greg. To your point, there's offenses up over the country. I think, that's sort of indicative and can be explained by a handful of different things. But I think it's creating some really exciting basketball in the early weeks, whether good or bad for some of these big programs.
Yep, it certainly has been exciting. And have there been a few teams in general that you felt relatively surprised about to the positive? Because the one for me, and I'm sure that you've taken note of them as well, has been Central Connecticut knocking off 2 power conference teams on the road. We're doing this as we don't know how they fared against against Sacred Heart on Monday, but Central Connecticut has been rock solid. Have there been a few other teams for you that have really stood out that you've just been surprised by and you feel like are really exceeding expectations?
Yeah, well, I'll touch on Central Connecticut really briefly because it's just a program I've always enjoyed covering in the NEC with Coach Patrick Sellers. It seems like he's always pretty constantly developing talent over the past couple of years there, and they're always a team that's sort of contending for conference championship come year end. But yeah, it seems like maybe even this year they've taken another step. You mentioned it, with a big win over Boston College. They go down to Rutgers. They get a win there as well. It's guys like Darren Smith taking a big leap this year, a guy like Jay Rogers taking a big leap this year, another player like Max Frazier who transferred from Siena 2 years ago and got his feet wet with the program last year and is now, becoming a big contributor. They're bringing a guy like Melo Sanchez from the transfer portal who has a really great story, started at Division II Hawaii Pacific.
Who just knocked off Boise St.
Yes, of course. It all circles back, and it's funny enough, I was tweeting about that the other day. But he started at D2 Hawaii Pacific, where he was one of the best Division II offensive talents in the country, so much so that he caught the attention of John Calipari at Arkansas and bought himself a year of development in the SEC. Now, it was a redshirt year. He really only made 2 appearances, but, now we're seeing sort of the benefits of that with Central Connecticut State. You mentioned it, it's definitely been a really positive surprise. Another conference I cover really well where I think there's been some interesting surprises has been the A10. A couple teams that, there's sort of the teams we expected to be near the top are being competitive. Dayton's had a solid start to the season. They just upset Marquette on the road for the second year in a row. George Washington, who we talked about a couple times on this show this offseason, and the transfer additions they were able to bring in over the course of the offseason, I think they've really impressed throughout the first couple weeks here. George Mason, even battling some injuries, is 5-0, and of course St. Louis turning the talent of Robbie Avila has really impressed, but they've had some players really step up this season, like Amari McCautry, who was getting some nominations for Mid-Major Madness Player of the Week last week. The top half of the conference is definitely really strong, but there's been some major surprises as well. I think Richmond is sitting 5-0, and I think they were picked toward the bottom half in the preseason conference poll in the bottom 4, if I'm not mistaken. The slight there would be, hey, maybe they haven't played the toughest schedule, but they've still played some pretty strong teams here. A William and Mary team that is going to be pretty competitive in the CAA and was picked top 4 in their preseason poll. A VMI team from the SoCon that has some really talented players like a TJ Johnson, who's been a consistent theme in our Player of the Week nominations over at Mid-Major Madness once again. We played another team like Eastern Carolina, who I think is a little bit underrated in the American. So again, certainly not the toughest schedule when you look at a team like Central Connecticut State out of the NEC, who's already played 2 high majors. But to be 5-0 for this Richmond team right now, coming in selected bottom tier of the A10, I think is pretty impressive. They'll have some tougher teams on the horizon. They'll play Furman on a neutral court, and then they'll have to visit Belmont, who's always a really, really consistent mid-major in the MEC. But yeah, I've been surprised by Richmond in the early going. The other 2 teams, maybe when you look at the A10 and you talk about surprises, have probably been St. Bonaventure and Davidson, who I know they sort of got blown away by Utah State. They were 5-0 with a high major upset over Boston College on a neutral court. Hunter Adam, who's a New Zealand native, had taken some really big strides for them, but additionally they've had some transfer portal guys make an impact over there. And then I mentioned St. Bonaventure as well, who's 5-0 in conference and was sort of selected to be more mid-tier heading into the season, but some impressive wins to start the year as well behind Daryl Buddy Simmons, what they call him, and Frank Mitchell as well in the front court there. But they had a couple wins over local rivals in Canisius and Siena. They beat out Bradley, who's always a really consistent mid-major in the Missouri Valley. Just beat out Robert Morris late last week. A team I've been surprised by, but probably similar to Davidson. They'll have some tougher tests on the horizon. Nationally ranked UNC coming up. Definitely surprise, as I mentioned, some surprise around the conference. The top tier has definitely sort of been the top tier, and it's sort of starting to fall into place. But Richmond, St. Bonaventure, Davidson, those teams have really surprised me in the A10 this year, and I think will be ones to watch out for down the line.
No question. We've had some nice surprises out there in the Atlantic 10, a lot of teams being able to get the job done. And I do think that this ESPN events tournament that we've got has a lot of great mid-major fare, as well as we know we're going to get Towson versus Liberty and Rhode Island versus Vermont. That's going to be going down on Tuesday. We don't know what the other 2 games are going to be, but how do you take a look at that field? Because I was very impressed by the way that Towson was able to lock down on defense. So then again, we always know that Towson is going to be really good on defense, and I think that battle between they and Liberty is going to be a lot of fun, because you've got a Liberty team that they just simply don't miss from 3. It's absolutely incredible the offense they've been able to provide.
Recording this Monday, there were even some exciting games this morning. I think Temple's battling with San Diego. Really impressed by what Towson did against Rhode Island. A Towson team that's always really impressive in the CAA under Pat Scarry. Always a consistent perennial contender the past couple of years. But the way they're able to return talent too between Tyler Tejada and Dylan Williamson. You mentioned it, Greg. A lot of talent, a lot of talented programs in this field. Just a lot of consistent mid-major programs. I mean, between Towson, Vermont. You mentioned Liberty. I brought up Bradley a little bit earlier, who've always been really good the past couple of years under Brian Wardell. Maybe Princeton taking a little bit of a step down this year, but we know what they've been able to do the past couple of seasons with Xavier Lee and making the NCAA tournament before his arrival, and of course UC San Diego being a program that found a little bit of success last year. So yeah, some really talented mid-major teams in this field. How do I go about evaluating these matchups on a neutral court? I think they're all going to be pretty competitive. We saw earlier today between Towson and Rhode Island a really competitive matchup that kind of came down to late before Towson pulling it out. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them take on some of the stronger teams, maybe this bracket, and find some success. So a little bit further down the field, I know there's sort of 3 brackets. We were just talking about a Richmond team that I think is really exciting. They'll play Furman coming up soon, and a Charlotte team down there that's very exciting as well. So yeah, a ton of talented programs here, Greg. A lot of good matchups over the next couple days. I'm excited to see the offensive liberty, as you pointed out. Excited to see Rhode Island in the A10, if they can sort of keep up the early progress they've made. As I mentioned, they fell to Towson a little bit earlier, but a program that was 4-1 coming into the week and had just picked up a pretty solid upset win on the road over Yale. Yeah, just overall some really talented teams in this event. I think that's what makes Feast Week really exciting, is not only do you get some great high major matchups, like we're going to see BYU and Georgetown and Miami and Dayton, which I know is more of a mid-major, but some of the premier programs in the country play. We're going to see some of the best mid-majors get to match up against each other, and once again, that's just why I think Feast Week is one of the most exciting time of years, particularly for some of these programs that I enjoy following.
Absolutely. It is such a great week with regards to everything that we're seeing. You're seeing some of the big, and then you get events out there in like Missoula, Montana right now. So
Yep.
you've got a little bit of everything, Riley. And are there just a few games for Tuesday that you're taking a look forward to? And I will say we're doing this as we don't know some of the matchups that we're going to get in the Maui Invitational, what have you. But are there a few teams that you're just really going to have your eye on that you're very intrigued by, or maybe you just want to see a little bit more of?
Sure. I mean, you touched on Towson Liberty. I think that'll be an exciting matchup. Hard to get away from that one. Rhode Island, Vermont. Of course, if we're sticking on this ESPN Events Invitational theme, if you will, going through the schedule here, I just pulled it up. There's definitely a handful of teams that I'm interested to see sort of how things play out. I'm looking at this Northern Iowa Loyola Chicago matchup because Northern Iowa, a team we have in our top 25 mid-major madness poll, ranked at number 8. So, at least...
And Loyola Chicago's not right now.
Yes, exactly. Loyola Chicago has really struggled in the early season. So the discrepancy between what we would think those two programs should be, interested to see Northern Iowa can, kind of keep that rolling against a team from the A-10. And then, on the flip side of that, I'm interested to see if Loyola Chicago can finally bounce back and get things going, because I think there's a lot of talent on that roster. I'm excited to see Drexel play Morgan State, just, by nature of I enjoy my Big Five coverage. I think that's an interesting matchup for the Dragons, who have been kind of up and down to start the year, but have shown some interesting player development, as I wrote in a story the other day. I touched on it a little bit earlier, and I don't know how it's going to go for St. Bonaventure, but I will be tuning in to see them play a little bit against nationally ranked North Carolina. Always exciting to see a mid-major team, go on the road with a potential opportunity at a high major upset. And obviously North Carolina, one of the premier programs in the country right now, one of the premier high major programs in the country right now. So a big task for Mark Schmidt and the Bonnies ahead, but it'll be an interesting game nonetheless. One more that I think is really exciting, and another program I think deserves a little bit of a shout out, is Quinnipiac, who ended up upsetting Pittsburgh. I believe that was Sunday night, if I'm not mistaken, as we're recording this. They'll have an opportunity to face off against UCF, technically on the road. A Quinnipiac team that's really talented in the MAC because they return a ton of talent from last year. Guys like Amari Monroe, who head coach Tom Pecor raved about, made a big decision to come back when he could have had some high major offers this offseason. They had Jaden Zimmerman, who was one of the premier freshmen in the conference last year, is taking a big step as a sophomore. They have a guy like Grant Randall come back, who's a veteran role player, is playing some consistent minutes. A guy like Samson Riley come back as well. And then they built on that class in the transfer portal, and we're sort of seeing that come to fruition now, starting with the upset over Pitt. And I think another chance for, a big game to add to their resume at UCF. There's tons of exciting matchups tomorrow. As I mentioned, it's Feast Week. I'm seeing Campbell is playing Wake Forest as well, which I think could be a really exciting matchup for a rebuilt Campbell's team this offseason. But yeah, I mean, just throughout the schedule, a handful of exciting matchups, but sort of those first four I talked about, I think are going to be the ones I'm tuning into, at least in the early window. I mean, we've literally got basketball from midnight to midnight almost, so it'll be a lot of fun to sort of track it all.
That's what's so great about this time of year. You get 15 plus hours of hoops every single day for the entirety of the week. It goes all the way from like 8 o'clock a.m. Pacific all the way until out here in lovely Las Vegas, you've got like UNLV versus Alabama that tips at midnight Eastern time, so that's great. And then a game like San Diego versus Cal Baptist in the late window should be a lot of fun as well. So we've got a lot that's going down. And Riley, you're doing a great job of being able to cover it all. I know that your main beat is over there at Mid-Major Madness. You do a great job looking at the portal report, which we have seen a guy or two already enter into the transfer portal. If I'm not mistaken, someone from Brown and Alex Lesbert has already entered in the transfer portal. So there's that. But that said, let the good people at home know it's all a tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, absolutely, Greg. First off, funny enough, you're not wrong. We have had maybe one or two guys already enter the transfer portal.
Yeah, Alex Lesbert did enter into the transfer portal.
Yes, had Chris Walker, who played 2 years ago at Binghamton, and I think he started this season at UIC, and now he's entering the transfer portal hoping to redshirt the remainder of this season to play for next year. So certainly we could get into a whole nother episode on sort of the issues at the transfer portal and maybe some things that need to be changed and sort of the best ways for players to go about navigating it. But yes, for now, Greg, thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure, man. I feel like I say this every time we're on this show talking about college basketball, but Feast Week is one of the most exciting times of year. So always great being here talking with you about some of the exciting mid-major teams around the country. For those listening at home, you can find me, as Greg mentioned at the start of the interview, you can find me on Twitter, on most social medias. It's typically at Riley Frain, RILEYFRAIN. I write for Mid-Major Madness and do some work for the Portal Report as well, so my coverage tends to be a little more mid-major centric as well as transfer portal related, but I'm always talking college basketball over there, so if you're into any of that, please stop by, check it out, say hello. We've got lots going on over the next couple weeks between Columbia coverage. I'll be heading down to Philadelphia for the Cathedral of College Basketball Classic at the Palestra this weekend, so excited for that. That's sort of my feast week coverage, if you will, and yeah, lots more on the horizon after that. Just thank you so much for having me, Greg. I really do appreciate it, as always, my man.
Absolutely. And a man that is currently not in the transfer portal because he's all in and he is committed to covering college basketball every single day is Riley. He does a tremendous job taking a look at this great sport, and every single time he joins me, let's go to great insights. So big thanks to Riley for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VC Family Podcast. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Tuesday as we hit some big shots. Here, lovely Las Vegas, for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Riley Frain, who does great work over at the Portal Report and Mid-Major Madness. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights, and he did so once again today. So, big thanks to Riley for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Tuesday as we hit some make shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at gunit_D1. Frankly, I just have no way of explaining the order because there are some multi-team events that are involved in the games not involving multi-team events, and then it's an order of tip time of multi-team events involving bigger teams, and then you've got the smaller teams involving the extra games, but there are some games in the extra games that do involve two larger teams. So I will just put the order that I go in with regards to the show notes. So if you're searching for a specific game, I always give you guys the time markers there. I actually go back and I listen to this myself to put in the time markers. So if you're looking to skip over breaks or anything like that, I've got you guys all covered. That's the best I can do for you guys because, man, this thing is all over the place. And the way that every book lists these games is just completely different. So they really do us no favors on this one. But that said, let's start with 601, 602 on the betting board. This is from Suncoast Credit Union Arena as Michigan State and East Carolina do battle, and Michigan State a 21.5 point favorite. Total on this game, it is 145. I said a total of 139.5. I'm in on the under. You've got two teams that are shooting it horribly from three-point range. Michigan State 29.4% from three. East Carolina a hearty 22.7%. And do I think that you're going to get a little bit of better three-point shooting from both of these teams? Yeah, but at the same time, both of these teams were outside the top 315 in terms of their three-point shooting percentage last year. Now, East Carolina currently outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but I do think that there's reason to believe that this should be rebounding a little bit with the fact that their rebounding is so rock solid. You bring back Jordan Riley from season ago, 18.5 points, 6 boards, like what he's able to bring to the table, and Giovanni Amaruju. He's come in from George Mason, and he's been able to supply the team with 17 points, nearly 10 boards, but I mean, as was the case last year with this East Carolina team, they're doing a terrible job of guarding the arc. They're allowing teams to shoot over 39% for three. Last year outside the top 300 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, they themselves are shooting just as hearty, less than 23% from three-point range, and it is a case where they are having a little bit of a tough time in terms of turnover department as well. Outside the top 225 in terms of ball security, you have a Michigan State team that is doing relatively everything well except for taking and hitting three-point shots. As for Michigan State, they have been able to do a really good job of owning the glass, top 10 team. With regards to rebound percentage, Jackson Kaler, he's able to give you 10 boards, 15 points per game. Love what he brings to the table. You've got Carson Cooper at 6'11", who's able to give you 5.5 boards. Colin Carr, 11 points, 5.5 rebounds. Like, each of your top 5 scorers for this team are pulling in there at least 4 rebounds per game. And Jeremiah Fears, he's been able to give you over 10 assists per game for a Michigan State team has been pretty solid in terms of winning the turnover battle. They're only turning the ball over about 11.5 times per game. They're playing very slowly. They're outside the top 275 in terms of total possessions per game. So do think that this is going to be a slog. I do think that helps out East Carolina. I think that East Carolina loses battle down low, but I don't think that they get completely bludgeoned down low. I do think that the three-point shooting for both of these teams rises up a little bit, but I think that you're in for a low possession game that Michigan State wins by closer to 17 or 18. Semi-line at 17.5, so taking those points with East Carolina, and I'm going to be in on this under 603, 604. It is Delaware, and they are going to be playing against UNC Greensboro. This is from Jacksonville, and with Delaware, they're currently a 1-point favorite. Total on this game, game, and it's anywhere between 150 to a 152. And seeing in some places UNC Greensboro now is a 1-point favorite as well. I did set Delaware as the 1.5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take a shot on them on the money line / as a 1-point favorite. As for Greensboro, they just lost so many guys from a season ago. They lose 9 out of their top 10 scorers, and they're really looking to pick up the pieces. Mike Jones, you ask who, and I say Coach Mike Jones of UNC Greensboro always likes to play a slow and controlled style. Right now, this has been more of a mid-tempo team, but I do think that they're going to turn it down, especially with the fact that they're turning the ball over 13 times per game, and they are not generating any turnovers whatsoever. They're right now outside the top 35 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They've had a few guys missing due to injury. You get back Valentin Pinedo, the transfer from St. Francis, Pennsylvania. He's been able to give the team 6.5 points per contest. Really love what Justin Neely brings to the table. 12 boards, 14.5 points. So he's been rock solid for a Greensboro team that over the last 2 years, they've been a top 75 unit in terms of their three-point shooting percentage, shooting about 33% this season. They're trusting in a non-D1 transfer and Donald Whitehead to help ignite the offense. He's been able to give you 13.5 points per game, but for Delaware, after last year, they were a top 40 team with regards to their three-point shooting percentage. They're once again shooting it relatively solid from three-point range. Overall, in terms of games against D1 teams, shooting above 35% from three. They had a game against a non-D1 team where they were just absolutely awful, but Justin Fernandez, he's been dealing with a little bit of injury, but being able to get him back should be relatively big for this team, as he was a guy that began his career over at George Mason and Providence, and he was a pretty highly touted recruit. He's been able to give the team 30 points in the first 2 games that he's played in. Tyler Hauser should be able to give you a little bit of versatility at 6'9", a guy that when he was over at VMI during the 2022-23 season, shot 35% from three, gave that team about 11 points, 5 rebounds per game, so I like his overall game. And then you do have Jameel Brown, who I think is a high upside guy, just dealt with injury last year over at Temple, but began his career at Penn State. He's been able to supply the team with 10 points, shooting 40% from three. Not a Delaware team that's going to be batting down the hatches on defense. They're well outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and quite frankly, this is a team that's getting dump trucked down the glass. They're well outside the top 250 with regards to rebound percentage as well, but it's not like UNC Greensboro has necessarily been the Mona Lisa Vitos of being able to hit the glass either. For Greensboro right now, they're well outside the top 275 in terms of their rebound percentage. They're right now allowing teams to shoot over 39% from three, which we should see some regression there, and I do think that this is going to be a little bit more of a slog of a game, so I did set my total here at a 145.5. I'm going to be in on the under, but I do like Delaware to be able to get the job done, whether it be as a 1-point favorite or a 1-point underdog, and on Delaware to go along with the under. 6-5, 6-6 on the card. Georgia State is going to be playing against Samford, and Sam Amford is a 5-point favorite. Total on this game is 151, and I set Georgia State as a 2.5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take a shot on them on the money line. Now, what Samford has done a great job of is taking care of the ball. 12th in the country in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. They're also 321st in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and they're just simply not knocking down shots outside the top 265 in terms of their overall shooting percentage. You do have Dylan Faulkner coming on over from Lipscomb with their coach in Lenny Acuff. He's been able to give you 13 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, and all across the boulevard, you've got like 6 different guys that give you between 4 and 5.6 rebounds per game. So by committee, they're doing a solid job there. Keaton Norris, 5.4 assists, only about 1.4 turnovers per game, but this is not a team that's necessarily lighting up from three-point range. And for Georgia State, I do think that the fact that you've got a Samford team that's not forcing a lot of turnovers is going to be able to help them out, as for the Georgia State team, they've had a tough time holding onto the ball outside the top 3 in terms of ball security, but you do have a lot of guys back from a season ago in this backcourt, Malachi Brown and Jelani Hamilton, who you've had Hamilton give you 16 points, he's shooting 94% the free throw line, 37% from three, and Brown, he's a little bit more of a facilitator, about 3 assists, 9.5 points per game. They do need to be getting a little bit more out of some of their big men, and you have Joe Chappell, who's been able to give you 10 points, 7 boards per contest, so he's been able to do a rock solid job there. But for this team, I do think that for Georgia State, who's right now shooting about 31.5% from three, they should get online against the Samford defense as 355th in all of college basketball in terms of three-point shooting percentage defense. They're allowing teams to shoot over 40% from three, and there should be a little bit of regression there, but still, I do think that Micah Tucker, the freshman, is going to be able to give this team some pop. 9 points, shooting 37.5% from three-point range, with more clean possessions for Georgia State than what they're accustomed to, and the fact that I do think that this team should be able to do a solid job on the glass. I do think that Georgia State is right now, they're in 60th in terms of their own field goal shooting percentage. They do get online, and I do think that they found a way to get the job done against a new look Samford team. I did set my total at a 154.5. I think that this is close enough for late game falling, and I think that both teams see some shooting positivity. So in on the over, and Georgia State on the money line. 6-7, 6-8 on the card. This is a game that's off the board. UTEP and UAB do battle style. Both of these teams played yesterday, and that's why this is off the board, but I've got my handicap. I did set UAB as a favorite of 6.5 points, willing to lay up to 6 with them. 7 or more, taking the points with UTEP, and then I set a total of 154.5. 154 or less in on the over, 155 or higher the under. For UTEP, the hallmark of this team is generating turnovers. Last few seasons, ever since Joe Golding took over the program, came in from Abilene Christian, this has been a top 25 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and I do think that for this UTEP bunch, you're going to be able to do a solid job once again, but you pretty much lose your top 4 scorers from a season ago, so they had to go with a lot of just strange transfers. You bring in Jamal West, who is over at Nichols, and he's been doing a little bit of everything, 14 points, 5 boards, a steal, block per contest, and Tyrese Watson, who he comes over after he last season was over at Louisiana Monroe, gave that team 1.7 steals per game. He has fit like a glove for this system. He's been able to give the team like 4 assists, 9 points, 3 steals per contest, so he's been rock solid there, but you just don't have a lot of outside shooting for this team, for one, and two, just a lack of rebounding as well. Kasim Watson, who comes on over from Delaware State at 6'9", he's been able to pull in there about 5 rebounds per game, but other than that, you don't necessarily have a ton here, and I do think that this is a UAB team that should do a solid job of being able to take care of the ball. I know that UAB had that rough loss to begin the season against Alabama State, and for UAB right now, they have been relying upon Chance Westry to really get the offense going. He's been able to supply the team with about 19 points per game, but the one thing this team really doesn't do is turn it over. UAB, a top 75 team in terms of total possessions per game, yet only 10.3 turnovers per game. You've got someone like a Daniel Rivero comes over from UMass. He's right now supplying 12 points, 8 boards. This is not a good three-point shooting team. UAB right now shooting less than 30% from 3, but I think that Kyron Lindsey also brings this team a lot of rough and tumble down low. He was the top rebounder over at Georgia a few seasons ago before he transferred out of there. You've got nice mix and match guys like a Karan McPherson, who began his career over at Northern Illinois, and I like the game of Jacob Meyer, guy that's been all around the block, was over at DePaul last season where he gave that team right around about 9 points, career 36% three-point shooter. Think that there's some positivity to it for this UAB team with their three-point shooting, and I do think that they are going to make sure that they take good care of the ball. 154 less than on the over, 155 or higher the under. 1 to lay up to 6 with UAB, 7 or more taking the points with UTEP. 6-9, 6-10 on the card. Kennesaw State, we give our Lane Kiffin go Owls. They're going to be playing against Oral Roberts. This is from the great state of Florida, and this game's off the board as these teams played yesterday, but I've got my handicap. Set Kennesaw State as a 5.5 point favorite, so 5 or less. I'm going to be willing to lay the number 6 or more, take the points with Oral Roberts, and then set a total of a 165.5. 165 or less. I'm in on the over, 166 or higher. The under. These two teams are coming off of a back-to-back, but you do have a pair of teams that are playing at warp speed. Kennesaw State a few years ago was actually number 1 in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game. They're in the top 50 once again this season. Oral Roberts has sped themselves up back into the top 75 after under Russ Springman the last few years. They let him go in the offseason. They were trying to dial it back, and for Oral Roberts, leaving something to be desired on offense going into the day on Monday, 293rd in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and Oral Roberts is a little bit of a work in progress team, but I do like the size that they've got around the perimeter. You've got like 5 different guys that stand at least 6'6", including 2 Yamanachi Williams. 2 seasons ago when he was over at Portland, he was giving that team like 9 points, 5 boards. He was shooting in the mid-30s from 3 at 6'10". Great versatility there. Ty Harper has been rock solid going into yesterday, averaging about 15 points per game, and Oral Roberts does need to clean up the 15 turnovers per game. That said, this has been a team that's been able to do an okay job in terms of guarding the three-point line. They themselves are generating about 14 turnovers per game. You've got a Kennesaw State team that certainly has been one that has beat up on some bad competition. Their games against non-D1 teams, they were winning all those by like 70, but against real competition, it's been a little bit more touch and go, but I like the fact that you bring back Simeon Cottle from a season ago. He has been absolutely tremendous for this team. He's right now supplying over 17 points per game. The Kennesaw team that entered into yesterday, shooting about 61% at the free throw line. They are outside the top 175 against C1 teams in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Not necessarily the most sizable team with Brandon Lou, skip to my Lou down low, giving you about 6 or so rebounds per game, but I do like the game of Perry Smith Jr. They get him in from NC Central, and he over at NC Central last season as a 6'8" combo player gave that team 11.5 points, 6 boards. He's able to help in terms of helping generate turnovers as well, so I think that he's going to be rock solid for this team, and I do think that Kennesaw State is going to do a nice job generating turnovers. They get back RJ Johnson, who was dealing with injury all last year as well, so it is a circumstance where I think that you're going to get a warp speed style game, so 165 or less and on the over, 166 or higher the under with Kennesaw State. 1 to lay up to 5 with them. 6 or more taking those points with Oral Roberts. 6-11, 6-12 on the betting board. It is South Dakota State. They're going to be playing against Utah Valley. This is from Hard Rock Arena in Utah Valley. A 1-point favorite. Total on this game, it is 154, and I say Utah Valley is a 2-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay the 1. Year in and year out, Utah State is just frankly one of the best mid-major defenses that you're going to find. And for Utah Valley, there's a lot of moving parts this season, but Trayvon Leonard, who gave the team 4+ assists per contest, really one of the main headliners for this team, is back. And I do believe that a team that is currently 278th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, Utah Valley, is going to be able to rebound. For South Dakota State, they undergo a coaching change in the offseason. They've been rock solid with their defense. They're currently about 93rd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And to the credit of South Dakota State, this unit has been able to do a really good job in terms of not allowing a lot of second and third chances. That's why the defense has been so good. They're allowing 6.7 offensive rebounds per game for their opponents. That's a top 10 defensive rebound percentage in the nation, but they have been a little bit more touch and go in terms of the offense. I know that they've had a few injuries to begin the season. You do bring back, though, Kellen Gary along with Joe Saylor. These two guys have been able to combine for about 20 points per game. Gary shooting 35.5% from 3. Saylor shooting about 38.5% from 3. And then Matthew Moore is another one of those holdovers from a season ago, 8 points, 5 rebounds per game. I do like what these guys are able to bring to the table. South Dakota State never really has been a team to really push the envelope and really force a lot of turnovers or anything like that, so that should be working in the favor of Utah Valley. You guys been a little bit sloppy with the ball to begin the season, but I do think that for Utah Valley, they're going to do a nice job in terms of holding up down low. You bring in a 6'10" big man and Isaac Hawkins, who's been able to give you about 4 boards per contest. Jackson Holcomb is another one of those main guys that returns from a season ago. He's supplying 16 points, 7 boards, 3.5 assists, and has really been a nice do-it-all Swiss Army knife guy. And though Utah Valley has actually been down with their defense this year, they've been very much up with regards to their offensive efficiency. They're a top 30 team in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage. They've done a tremendous job in terms of shot blocking down low as well. So even though the defense has been down, their shot blocking with their overall size, bringing back Hayden Welling, the other of the Welling brothers, who's been able to do a nice job providing size at about 6'10" down low, has helped. And Tyler Hendricks, who comes over from Central Florida, 12.5 points per contest. He's been able to do a great job on that front. It is a Utah Valley team that has been forcing about 15 turnovers per game as well. So I do think the Utah Valley, who's been a top 50 team in terms of opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, they get online here, and I do think that this is going to be a little bit of a lower scoring game with a South Dakota State team that's not allowing teams to be able to get a lot of second and third chances, and a Utah Valley team that year in and year out pretty rock solid with regards to their defense, and I do not expect this to be a very up and down game. South Dakota State over the last few seasons has actually become a relatively mid-tempo team. Now Utah Valley, they're typically going to push a little bit of tempo, but it's not like they're going to be playing at warp speed themselves right now for Utah Valley here in the early goings in terms of total possessions per game. They're checking in more in the neighborhood about 135th. So did set a total here of 148. I like the under, and with Utah Valley, going to be willing to lay the 1. 613, 614 on the card. St. Bonaventure and North Carolina do battle, and this is from Suncoast Credit Union Arena, and right now North Carolina 10.5 point favorite. 152.5 is the total, and somehow line at 10. So 10.5 is a minimum buy point here on St. Bonaventure. St. Bonaventure just has a way of being able to slow games down. They are back outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game. Defense always rock solid with this team. They're typically a top 75 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they're back within the top 100 right now in this small sample size. Frank Mitchell has been a double-double machine with 16 points, 10.5 rebounds per game. I like the way that they're going to their bench just a little bit more this season. I think part of it is Deshaunte Bowen, who was a main guard for them last season, but was limited to only 10 games due to injury. He's still easing his way back. He's been able to give out 4 assists per game, but the scoring has been lacking with about 5 points per contest. But love what Darrell Simmons is bringing to the table. He comes in after he had a nice run over at Carter Webb, and now he's supplying with the team with 18.5 points, shooting over 40% from 3-point, and that's what the St. Bonaventure team really focuses in on. Efficiency on the offensive end and on the defensive end. As for the Bonnies, they've done a great job in terms of their 3-point shooting defense over the last few seasons as well, and this does feel like a North Carolina team that is going to leave something to be desired with regards to their 3-point shooting. Now, rock solid down low as they typically are. They had 1 or 2 down years. They're back with bringing in the 7-footer Henry Vassar with about 15 points, 7 boards per contest. Caleb Wilson, star freshman, he's been doing it all. 20 points, 10 boards. Not a guy that I think is going to continue to shoot 40% from 3, but I mean, he's made out of his 5 threes, 2 of them, so yay, barely there. But they are dealing with that injury of Seth Trimble in the backcourt, and that puts a lot on Kyan Evans, who was a solid facilitator over at Colorado State last season, but I mean, it's still a little bit of a step down from the guard play they had a season ago. You've got a guy like Jonathan Boom Boom Powell that's able to do a solid job in terms of hitting the boards for the team. And Jaron Stevenson, who's been a little bit around the block last season, had a pretty solid year over at Alabama. He provides a little bit of stretchability at 6'10", but isn't necessarily like a light jump three-point shooting guy. And I do think that for St. Bonaventure, having Mitchell down low allows them to be able to hold in there on the glass. North Carolina is still going to be able to win that battle. North Carolina, top 15 team with regards to rebound percentage. You're blocking a lot of shots, but I think that St. Bonaventure finds a way to be able to slow this game down. I think North Carolina is going to be built a little bit more on defense as well. So Manitoba 148, I like the under. And with the Bonnies at anything of 10.5 plus, I'm willing to take those points. 615, 616 on the card. It is Ohio State, and the Ohio State plays host to Mount St. Mary's. Mount St. Mary's currently an underdog of 25.5 points. And total on this game, it is 147. And I said Mount St. Mary's has a 26.5 point underdog. So here at the 25.5, I'm going to be willing to lay it with Ohio State. Ohio State just has a really good backcourt, and you return three guys that were very nice scorers for them 8 seasons ago. Currently headlined by Bruce Thornton, who's been doing it all at the guard spot, 22.5 points, 3.5 assists. Right now shooting 60% from three. We'll see a downtick with that, but John Mobley's back from a season ago. Nice double-figure scorer who's been able to shoot it well from three-point. Devin Royals added a three-point shot. He's able to give you 6 rebounds per game. Ohio State's still waiting on Josh Ojawana, the transfer from Baylor, to be able to get back in the fold, but their size is still pretty rock solid. You bring in a 6'8" combo player from Wright St and Brandon Noel, who's been able to get the team 7.5 points, 5.5 boards, and then you've been able to get some further help from Amari Bynum, being able to come in and give the team about 8 points per game. And for Mount St. Mary's, just very sloppy with the ball. They're well outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and they don't force any turnovers themselves. They are a bottom 10 team in the country in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They do a pretty solid job in terms of guarding the three-point line, but they're grabbing no offensive rebounds whatsoever as well. They're well outside the top 320 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, despite having 6'10" Luke McKeldin, who's been able to give you about 10 points, 6 boards per contest. Xavier Lipscomb has really become a do-it-all guy at the guard spot. He's right now giving the team 10 points, 4 assists, 6 rebounds, but also 4 turnovers per game. Justin Amati is able to hit it down low as well, but you don't have a lot of great three-point shooting for the team outside of Arlandis Keys. Keys has come in, and he was a nice ancillary scorer a season ago, and he's bumped that up to about 13.5 points per contest. Last year shot 36% from 3, currently shooting 50% from 3, but again, we should be seeing a little bit of a downtick there. He's dealt with a little bit of injury, but should be good to go in this game. But that said, I do think that Ohio State going to be able to control things down low. It's a Mount St. Mary's team that is currently well outside the top 275 in terms of total possessions per game. They're looking to slow it down, and I just don't think that you get enough clean possessions here for the over. I saw my total 142.5. Ohio State, ever since that IU Indy game, has been a relatively mid-tempo team themselves, so I like the under, and I'm willing to lay it here with the Ohio State University. 617, 618 on the card. It is San Diego and Cal Baptist doing battle from Acrisure Arena, so in the state of California. Right now, the Cal Baptist, they are 7 to 7.5 point favorites. Totals between 148.5 to 149, and with Cal Baptist, I only set them as a 2-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points with San Diego. Now, with San Diego, their overall 3-point shooting is about 38%. If you look at just D1 foes, that's 37%, but still, they've been rock solid there, and it's going to be a battle of strength on strength. San Diego has been bombing it from 3. You've got a Cal Baptist team that runs you off the 3-point line. Second straight year where they're in the top 20 in terms of fewest percentage of opponent shots that come from 3. Opponents are right now shooting only 25% from 3. There's going to be some negative regression there. And this Cal Baptist team has been one of the better rebounding teams in all of college basketball, but they themselves leave something to be desired from 3. Last year, they shot about 31.5 to 32% from 3. They were back at 31.3% this season. You bring back a 20-point per game scorer in Dominique Daniels, who's been rock solid this year, 19 points, 4 assists. Martell Williams, how he does it is he shoots 41% from 3 with 14.6 rebounds per game, and then you've had Thomas Endong, who's been able to come in. He's been able to give the team 8 rebounds. You've got size upon size. You've got a true 7-footer and Brady Ahenje, who he doesn't give you a lot of scoring, but he gives you about 6 rebounds per game. But I do think that for San Diego, even though they might not necessarily completely win that battle down low, I do think that they're going to do a good job of hanging in there with a guy in Tim Moore, who comes on over from NJIT. He's been able to give you some versatility at 6'6". He pulls in there about 3 boards. He's able to give you a little bit of 3-point shooting. One of your main men down low, and Vuk Bosovic, he comes over from Bosnia and Herzegovina. He had 6'7", has a nice little bit of combo player, 9.5 points, 3.5 boards, 3.5 assists per game. And then Juan Sebastian Gorecito, I think might be the best overall shooter in this game. Right now, giving you 13 points, shooting over 45% from 3. Tunari Lane, a double-figure score in the Sun Belt last season. He's been able to expand upon that, give the team 12 points per game. It is a San Diego team that has been turning the ball over about 13 times per game. Cal Baptist, okay at generating turnovers, not necessarily amazing. And for this San Diego team, they have been outside the top 3 in terms of defensive offensive rebounding percentage, but they've done a great job themselves of being able to guard the three-point line. And when San Diego gets to the free throw line, they're shooting over 80% at the charity stripe. You've got a good shooting team in San Diego. You've got a nice rebounding team in Cal Baptist. I think that San Diego does enough to be able to hold in there, and what I think is going to be a mid-tempo game. I did somebody total here at a 146. Cal Baptist has been slowing things down a little bit more this year. San Diego speeding things up a little bit more, but that said, I'm going to be in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to take those points with San Diego. 619, 620 on the card. Abilene Christian and William and Mary do battle from Jacksonville. You don't just get William, you don't just get Mary, but you get my handicap because this game is off the board. But I said America's favorite tag team as a 2.5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay a deuce with William and Mary, 3 or more, taking the points with Abilene Christian, then set a total of 154.5, 154 or less. I'm in on the over, 155 or higher, the under, and with America's favorite tag team. If it's just William or Mary, I would be setting them as an underdog, but I'm going to take both. But with William and Mary, this is a style that under Brian Earl, that they're just looking to bomb it from 3, just consistently. Brian Earl's teams are in the top 30 in terms of percentage of shots that come from 3. They don't necessarily have a lot of size down low, but the good news is you go up against an Abilene Christian team that year in and year out is outside the top 275 in terms of their rebound percentage. You bring back a guy in Chase Lowe, who's been in the program for a few years, not giving you a ton of scoring, but 8 points, 4 boards, 3.5 assists, as a 6'5", a little bit of a do-it-all sort of guy. And then you bring in Tunde Valdez-Sassi, who was over at the Atlantic 10 last season. He at 6'8" or so has been able to give you about 8.5 points. He's a career mid-30s three-point shooter. Cade Askins from Dartmouth is a guy that's shooting in the mid-30s from 3. He's got 6'6" size. So this is exactly what Brian Earl is looking for out of his roster. And it's a William and Mary team that has been turning the ball over about 14 times per game, but they themselves have been a top 125 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. And this Abilene Christian team last year was number 1 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They've taken a little bit of setback this year. They lost their top scorer, Keon Williams, in the offseason. They had to kick him off the team. So now they're looking to Braden Hubbard to really carry the mail. Lone guy that's right now averaging double figures with about 15 points per contest. You've had a few ailments with Yano Rivera and Childerian Newton missing a game or two. These guys should be all good to go here, but I mean, right now you're relying upon Rich Smith to really lead the offense. He's only giving you 7 points per game, but throws in there 4 boards, 4 assists, a little bit over steal per contest, so good versatility there. But again, with this Abilene Christian team, year in and year out, they've had a tough time on the glass. Thus far, they've been a little bit better on the boards, but I mean, that's a very warped number with playing against some non-Division I teams, and this has been an offense that when they played against Division I teams, they've been stuck in neutral, scoring 73 points or fewer in all those games. Meanwhile, you've got a William and Mary team that's going to be looking to push tempo. William and Mary last year well within the top 100 in terms of total possessions per game. They entered into yesterday 24th in the country. They are going to be coming off of a little bit of a rough back-to-back. Meanwhile, Abilene Christian more around about 300th currently in terms of total possessions per game. I think that William and Mary gets things sped up. I think that you get a lot of turnovers, but I think that turns into a lot of good opportunities for both of these teams, and I think that William and Mary just is able to run that system a little bit better. So 2 or less, I'm willing to lay with William and Mary. 3 or more, taking the points with Abilene Christian. 154 or less, I'm in on the over. 155 or higher, the under. 621, 622 on the card. James Madison and Nebraska of Omaha do battle from Ocean Bank out there in the great state of Florida, and I've got my handicap since this is another one that is off the board. I did set James Madison as a 4-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 3.5 with them, 4.5 or more, taking the points with Omaha, and then I set a total here of a 150, so 149.5 or less. I'm in on the over. 150.5 or higher, the under. And with Omaha, this is a squad that is very much built around 3-point shooting, and they are a team that's going to be looking to push a little bit more tempo, not necessarily play at warp speed, but this is a squad that is traditionally a little bit faster. Meanwhile, James Madison, they were last year 300th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Would not be surprised if they try to get back to their roots a little bit after entering into yesterday 228th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. They're coming off a back-to-back, and frankly, the game that we saw yesterday for James Madison was a little bit unlike them as well, as that was a little bit more of an up-down all-around game as well. And for this James Madison squad, I do think that the big key for them is just being able to win the battle down low, because you've got an Omaha team that they lose Markel Sutton from a season ago. You bring back a lot of the ancillary pieces for this team, but they don't necessarily have a lot of the size. So you've got Eddie Ricks, who's been in the Preston Spradlin system for multiple seasons. He's giving you about 8.6 rebounds per game. The backcourt of Bradley Douglas along Cliff Davis. Both of these guys have been solid. Davis a little bit more of an off-the-ball scorer that's able to give you 13 points per contest. Douglas, who comes over from Georgia Southern, a little bit more the head of the snake. He needs to give you about 4 assists per game, but you also have some nice depth with this team with likes of Paul Jones coming in off the bench. Eli Wilborn was a pretty rock-solid player a few seasons ago over at St. Francis, Pennsylvania, part-time starter over at Duquesne. These guys need to find their footing just a little bit more. Wilborn has been a little bit of a disappointment. Meanwhile, for the Nebraska of Omaha unit, season, and it's all built around the likes of Lance Waddles and those guards that were able to return from the season ago. Been a little bit disappointing, and you'll note with Omaha last season, their three-point shooting really heated up in conference play. In non-conference play, they started out a little bit cold, and they're shooting right now about 37.5% from three. Waddles is giving you 16 points, 5 boards per contest. Osborne about 17 points per game, and he's been able to throw in their 2 steals per contest. This has been a team that's been able to generate more turnovers, but Lance Waddles is right now the lone guy on the roster, giving you more than 4.2 rebounds per game. Only stands about 6'4", so the lack of size is certainly there. You need Cameron Thomas, who stands more around about 6'8", and he was a nice contributor for the team last year. 6.5 points, 4 boards, shot in the high 30s from 3. You need him to give you a little bit more than 3.5 rebounds per game and hit the boards a little bit more, and I do think that James Madison going to look to slow this game down a skoge a bit more. This is a James Madison team that last year was pretty solid with their three-point shooting defense. It's been a little bit more lax this season, but I do think that they hunker down a bit more here. At 149.5 or less, in on the over, 150.5 or higher the under. James Madison willing to lay up to 3.5 with them, 4.5 or more. Taking those points with Omaha. 623, 624 on the card. Wake Forest and Campbell do battle. Wake Forest, the home team, is a favorite of 16 points. So on this game, you're going to be finding it open up at a 156. We're down to a 151.5, and at a 151.5, that is my minimum buy point on the under. I did set my total here at a 151, and with this Campbell squad, it has been one that's been in quite a bit of transition this year. Last year, they were one of the slower teams in all of college basketball, and they actually retained quite a few of the ancillary guys from last year. Tazos Cook, Cam Gregory, these are guys that returned from the season ago, but now you've got the Florida assistant in John Andrzejczuk, who takes over, and for Campbell last year, a really good three-point shooting defense. They've been more pedestrian this season with that regard. The big thing for this team is that they're actually doing a good job of running teams off the three-point line in terms of percentage of opponents' shots that come from 3. They're a top 30 team in all of college basketball in that regard, but they are getting it taken to them a little bit with regards to just down low. They've been outside the top 175 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. You do have Davideus Butka, when 6'9", comes over from Pepperdine, 15 points, 9 boards, steal and per contest. Has some good versatility there, but the team on offense just has not been able to be very clean. They're outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and now they face off against a Wake Forest squad that has been good at generating turnovers. Top 55 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and with the way that this team is built, they should be able to win that battle down low. Omaha Blue has been a little bit of a disappointment after being a top 50 recruit. He's only been able to give the team 4.5 points, 2 boards, but he has some versatility. Trayvon Spillers at 6'8" is just a relative man down low. He's been able to give this team 6 boards, 15.5 points per game, but the real, shall we say, breakout here has been with Juke Harris. Just a little bit of a do-it-all guy. 20.5 points, 8 boards. He's been able to shoot about 38% from 3 for a Wake Forest team that last year was one of the worst in all of college basketball in terms of their three-point shooting. Not that they're amazing this year, but they've got a little bit more facilitation with Nate Calmezzi being able to lead things. He's always been a guy that's turned the ball over a little bit too much in his career, but he's been much more efficient this year, fewer than 2 turnovers per game. He's only given the team 8 points per contest, but he's finding Harrison space. Miles Colvin, who comes over from Purdue, he's been able to shoot in the high 30s from 3. Give this team 12 points per contest, and I do think that with Wake Forest, they're going to do a good job in terms of winning that turnover battle. I think that Campbell does just enough to be able to hold in there, though. It is a Wake Forest team that they still haven't turned the ball over 12 times for contests themselves, and it's not a Wake Forest team that is necessarily going to be looking to gun it. If you look at their total possessions per game number, it's a little bit warped by the fact that they played that overtime game against Michigan earlier in the season. They're currently 26th in the country with that regard. If you look more in possessions per 40 minutes, they're a slightly above average team. So this is a circumstance where I did set my total at a 151, so at the 151.5 in on the under, and I'm willing to take the points with Campbell, made them a 15-point dog. 625, 626 on the card. It is Central Florida, and they're going to be playing us to Quinnipiac. Quinnipiac, an underdog of 13 to 14 points, 162 to 163 is a total. Made a total of 164. I'm going to be in on the over with Quinnipiac. They're coming off of a really nice win on the road against Pittsburgh, and I don't think that they're going to get back-to-back road triumphs as a double-figure underdog, but like when I'm seeing on this team, we talked about them with Riley Frain in the last segment, and you've got Tom Picara, who runs a relatively fast style. This team really lit it up from three-point in that game against Pittsburgh, and last year they were outside the top 250 in terms of three-point shooting percentage. I thought that they were a little bit better than that, but I also do think that someone like Samson Riley, who's right now shooting 63% from 3 with his 9.5 points per game, going to cool down a little bit, but love what Amari Monroe is able to bring to the table. Last year, averaged 18 points, 9 rebounds per game. He's a little bit down with regards to that with 16.6 boards, but 3.8 steals per game. And this is a Quinnipiac team that last year was a top 100 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession possession basis. They've been a little bit down with that regard, but they've been a top 150 team with regards to rebound percentage. So I do think that they're going to hold in there against a Central Florida team that they very much always look to win the battle down low. You bring in a 7'2" big man in John Bull, part of the Bulls, who are always very, very versatile. They haven't necessarily gotten a ton of scoring out of him, but he does provide size down low. And then you got JaMychal Silwell, who was one of the top rebounders in all of college basketball for UW Milwaukee last year, 11 points, 8 boards. Do like what he brings to the table with Riley Kugel really taking off for the team offensively. He's right now shooting 54% from 3, 18 points per game. You may recall when he was a freshman at Florida, he had a really nice run towards back of half of SEC play. That was like 3 or so years ago, so he's got that in him. But right now, you've got a Central Florida team that's shooting 45.6% from 3. Are they a good three-point shooting team? Yes, but they're going to see a bit of regression with that regard. And for the second straight year, Central Florida has really decided that they are going to gun it. They're not quite as fast as they were last year. Last year, this was actually a top 5 team in terms of total possessions per game, but regardless, you are going to be getting quite a bit of pace out of them, as Central Florida right around about 142nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Quinnipiac was looking to play a little bit of tempo last season. They're right around about 134th, and I do think that both of these teams are going to be relatively efficient on the offensive side of things. You've got a Quinnipiac team that can be a little bit spotty with their three-point shooting defense, but I do think that Quinnipiac is going to be able to hold in there in the fight down low, and I do think that Quinnipiac finds a way to be able to cover this number. So I did set a line of 12. I'm going to be willing to take those points, and I'm in on the over. Semi-total 164, 627, 628 on the card. It is Florida State, and they are going to be playing host to Cal State Bakersfield. Meet for the Roadrunners, who find themselves as now 23-point underdogs. They open up as 19-point underdogs. So last game between 156.5 to a 157.5, and semi-line at 22.5. So 23 does become my buy point here on the Roadrunners. With Florida State, they have been very much looking to play very up-tempo. They have Luke Locks come over after he was an NBA assistant, and he's been having this team playing at a top 50 mark in terms of total possessions per game, and they're a top 30 team in terms of percentage of their shots that come from three-point range. For Florida State, right now they are attempting 32 two-point shots per game. They're attempting 39 threes per game, and they're pretty solid. They're shooting 35.5% from 3. You bring in a lot of guys that were just three-point specialists at their respective schools, like Flashay Jones comes over from St. Bonaventure. He's been the main guy with 17.5 points per game. Robert McRae was just a do-it-all guy over at Jacksonville, and he's been that this year for Florida State. 15 points, 8 assists, 2.5 steals, 3.5 rebounds per game. Chauncey Wiggins at 6'10", he comes over from Clemson. He's been able to give the team 14 points, 6 rebounds per game. So all these guys have been very rock solid. And then you have someone like Alex Steen, who's been able to give you some rebounding. He's been able to come in as a young gun, and he's been able to give you some good production. And on the other end for Bakersfield, it's been a tumultuous just run for them in general. They let go of their coach and Rob Barnes after the whole trafficking situation. That was not great, to say the least. They did maintain much of this roster, and now they've got really 2 guards that have been headlining things. Dalen Smith, who comes over from Alabama A&M, and CJ Hardy. Hardy's a holdover from last season, and he has been shooting a hearty 50% from three-point range with 16 points per game. Smith has been able to supply this team with 17 points per contest. At its core, Bakersfield typically a slower team that they don't really take a lot of threes, and they've been relatively staying with that this season as well, despite the fact that they're under the interim coach in Mike Scott. But this is not the same rebounding team that they have been in past years. They're well outside the top 100 with regards to rebounding percentage. They need Pierre Genste, who he comes over from Fresno State. He's been a starter. He's been able to give you about 6.5 rebounds per game. You need a little bit more than 2.8 points per game. He's been pretty rock solid down low, but other than he and Ron Jessamy, who comes over from Tennessee State, he's giving you 6.5 boards, and to his credit, 2.5 blocks per contest. You don't necessarily have a ton down low. AJ George was a double-figure scorer 2 seasons ago over at Long Beach State. He's only been able to give the team 7.5 points per game, despite Hardy shooting well from 3. They're shooting as collective 30% from the outside, and this is a Florida State team that's a top 25 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. I do think that this Bakersfield team does just enough to be able to in there. Like I said, 23 becomes my buy point. I set my line at 22.5, but I do think that you get very much an up and down game. Florida State has sped up everyone this year, so looking at the over, my total 158.5, and at 23 plus, taking those points with Bakersfield. 629, 630 on the card. It is Old Dominion on the road against Villanova. Villanova is a favorite of 19.5 points. 144.5 is the total, and set a line at 17.5. I'm going to be willing to take those points with Old Dominion. For Old Dominion, it's been a bit of a tumultuous season for them, as last year they were a top 25 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage. They've taken a bit of a setback this season, and now they have to compete with one of the top rebounders in the country right now, Duke Brandon, who's been able to give this Villanova team 10.2 points and 14.4 rebounds per game. That has been relatively good for them, but the real guy that has been able to create in the backcourt for Villanova has been Bryce Lindsey, coming on over from James Madison Madison shooting 50% from three, 20.5 points per contest. And typically with Kevin Willard teams, they're not necessarily super up-tempo. They went a little bit faster last year with that Crab 5 system, but that said, they're back to being outside the top 200 in terms of total possessions per game. They're allowing teams to shoot 40% from three. We should see some positivity with that regard, but they've been able to own the glass with the way that Brandon has been able to do a rock-solid job there. And for Old Dominion, this is a squad that should see a little bit of positivity with the fact that they have been just getting completely decimated with regards to their offense as well. This has been a team that just doesn't generate a lot of turnovers, 10.5 turnovers per game. That's outside the top 300 with that regard, but we are seeing this team starting to be able to rebuild a little bit on offense after Robert Davis. He was dealing with an injury towards the beginning part of the season. He was last year averaging 15 points per game. He was playing hurt in a few games. He's now been able to get the team double figures in 3 out of the last 4 games, and then they bring in Casey Shaw from Maryland Eastern Shore and LJ Thomas from Austin Peay. 2 nice guys that are able to really run the show and allow Mr. Davis to be able to play off the ball. These 2 guys are combining for about 27.5 points per game. Thomas has been able to give you 4 assists. Has never been a great 3-point shooter right now, shooting 37.5% from 3. Should see that go downward, and this is an Old Dominion team that was outside the top 355 last season in terms of their 3-point shooting percentage, but Jordan Battles giving you 6 boards per contest, and then you bring back the 7-footer and Caleb Swanton Roger. Actually began his career at Maryland, so has a little bit of familiarity with Mr. Willard. He's been able to give the team 5 boards blocked per contest. Do think that Old Dominion is in a little bit of a slower game, going to be able to hold in there. I think that this is going to be a bit more defense-oriented, a little bit more sloppy. Villanova will win this game comfortably, but set a line more around a 17.5. I think Old Dominion holds in there on the glass, so I'm going to be willing to take the points with Old Dominion, and I'm in on the under semi-total 143.5. 631, 632 on the board. It is Murray State and George Washington doing battle. This is a neutral court game and off the board because both of these teams played yesterday, but I've got my handicap. I set our nation's first president in George Washington as a 3.5 point favorite. Going to be willing to lay up to 3 with them. 4 more taking the points with Murray State, and then made a total of 159.5. 159 or less than on the over, 160 or higher the under. George Washington has been a top 100 team in terms of total possessions per game. Murray State, a top 60 team in terms of total possessions per game. I sense this game being a little bit slower, though, because this is going to be game number 3 in 3 days. So these guys have had to take it out of them going into the day yesterday. Murray State doing a really good job of just being able to play with pace and space, shooting 37.5% from 3, and they are running teams off the 3-point line. They lead the country in terms of fewest opponents' 3-point shots per game in all of college basketball. Now, they're allowing opponents to shoot about 35% on those threes, but they're really running teams off the 3-point line. You've got Javon Jackson, who's been able to do a good job in the backcourt, give you 17 points. He doles out about 2 assists, shooting about 43.5% from 3-point. It is a Murray State team that also has been a top 125 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and they've had Mason Miller be a little bit of a do-it-all guy for the team at 6'6". He actually comes over with Ryan Miller, who's an assistant over at Creighton, and Frederick King also comes over from Creighton. These guys have been very instrumental. Mason Miller shooting about 45% from 3 with 9 points per contest. King has been able to give you 7 boards and 14.5 points per game, but they're going to need to get a little bit more down low. That has been the main kryptonite for Murray State. Murray State right now is allowing teams to just really bludgeon them on the glass. They have been outside the top 300 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and that's why I do think that George Washington is going to be able to get the job done with George Washington. You've got a guy in Garrett Johnson who last season he completely missed due to injury. 2 years ago, he was giving that team 15 plus points. He was throwing in there a few boards, and in the few games that he's played, first 4 games, he was averaging about 18 points, 5 rebounds per game, but then you've got Rafael Castro last year gave you about 8 rebounds and a block per contest. You've been able to get good production out of Tyrone Marshall, 6'6", a little bit of a combo player that comes over from Western Kentucky, is able to give you 9 points, 6 boards, does a little bit of everything, and the team is relatively good with their 3-point shooting. You've got Trey Dinkins, Christian Jones, Boo Boo Benjamin, all guards that will be able to give you between 10 and 13 points per contest, with Dinkins right now shooting 45% from 3. That'll see a little bit of regression, but did a nice job running that Duquesne system. Now, the big thing for George Washington, holding on to the ball a little bit better. They have been outside the top 275 in terms of ball security, but when they hold on to it, they've been a top 75 team in terms of both their 3-point and their 2-point shooting percentage, and I do think that they're going to do a nice job on the glass. 159 or less, and on the over 160 or higher, the under, with George Washington will lay up to 3 with them, 4 more, taking the points with Murray State. 633, 634 on the card. North Texas is going to be playing us Eastern Washington. Eastern Washington is a underdog of 11.5 to 12.5 points. 141 is the total. Set a total of 141.5. I do like the over. You've got a battle of 2 very different systems. Right now, for North Texas, they're back to playing super slow and controlled. They are currently 355th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Eastern Washington more around about 139th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Eastern Washington back outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. North Texas in the top 75, but for this North Texas team, you've had some growing pains in terms of the offense. They do bring in Daniel Robinson, the coach from Cleveland State a season ago, and his Cleveland State team's always had a little bit of a tough time on the glass, and right now they are outside the top 175 in terms of rebound percentage, and for North Texas, they just can't hit their two-point shots. They're outside the top 330 in terms of their own two-point shooting percentage. They bring in Will McClendon, who began his career over at UCLA. He's been able to give you 13 points per contest, and it's actually been Jashawn Stevenson who has been the main scorer for the team. He's one of the guys that came over from Cleveland State. Wasn't even necessarily like a uber talented guy over at Cleveland State a season ago, but he's been able to give this team 14.5 points, a little bit over 3 boards per contest, but I do think that that's going to allow this Eastern Washington team to be a hold in there. Now, with North Texas, they've been a top 50 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They're doing a nice job guarding the perimeter. Teams are only shooting about 29.5% from three-point range against them, but for Eastern Washington, you've got a lot of guys that they returned from season number 1 under Dan Monson for season number 2, as you've been able to have Isaiah Moses be that main transfer that comes on over from UC Riverside, was a double-figure score for them last season, 18.5 points, 3.5 assists, right now shooting 45% from 3. As a whole, Eastern Washington did shoot about 34.5% from 3, and for Eastern Washington, they're not grabbing a lot of offensive rebounds. As a matter of fact, they're outside the top 335 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, but they're a top 150 team in terms of their defensive rebound percentage. Cleveland State hovering more around about 290th. You've got Kyrie Huey, who down low 2 seasons ago over at Idaho State, he was giving that team 6+ boards per contest, provides 6'9", 6'10" size, and you just, after Isaiah Moses, have a lot of guys that they're sort of contributing, as you've got Huey, Stanton Rogers, Alton Hamilton, John Radford, all between 8.5 and 10 points per contest. These guys have been able to do a rock solid job, and then Emmett Marquette, he's one of the main guys that returns from season ago, 6.5 points, shoots in the high 30s from 3-point range, and I do like the game of JoJo Anderson as well. He comes on over from Idaho, where he was a little bit of a reserve for them, but has been able to step in, give the team a little bit at the guard spot with a pair of assists per contest. So I do think that this Eastern Washington team, with the way that North Texas just does not do a great job on the glass, they do just enough to hold in there, and I do think that this is going to be close enough for late game following. Set a total of 141.5, so here at the 141, like the over, and the points here with Eastern Washington, 635, 636 on the card. Indiana plays versus Kansas State. Kansas State does find themselves as a underdog of 8.5 points, total on this game between 155.5 to a 157.5. Did set a total of 155.5, so 156 plus, I'm going to be in on the under. I do think that Indiana should be the favorite here, but can only set them at a 7.5, so here at the 8 plus, I'm going to be one take those points with Kansas State. Indiana has certainly been able to get a ton of Tucker DeVries, who's been amazing in so many different aspects, 19 points, 6 boards, 3 assists, shooting over 46% from 3, and as a whole, Indiana shooting 39.5% from 3, starting to see a little bit of regression with that regard. Now for Indiana, they are playing much faster under the DeVries system than West Virginia did a season ago, mainly because that West Virginia team with DeVries and company being out of the fold, they had to play so slowly just out of necessity, and for Indiana right now, about 198th in terms of total possessions per game, so very much mid-tempoed. Meanwhile, Kansas State, they have really sped things up. They're up to about 42nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Kansas State, I do expect them to continue to have a little bit of regression with their 3-point shooting percentage, as this is a team that's still shooting well above 43% from 3-point range. As a matter of fact, 43.3%. BJ Aggerty is going to be one of the best scorers in all of college basketball, 28 points right now. He's shooting over 40% from 3, 6 assists, 5 boards. You love what he's able to bring to the table. But then Nate Johnson has been all sorts of versatile as well. Comes in from Akron, a steal and a half, 4.5 assists, 6 boards, 13.5 points per game. You may not have necessarily that rim protector like you had last season in Oganda Yesu, but I mean, that was a guy that really didn't pan out for the team. This is a team that's going to be embracing positionless basketball, so Sam Alexis for Indiana, he's going to need to come up big. He was part of that title-winning team over at Florida last season when he was at Chattanooga 2 years ago, was a 7+ rebound per game guy, but I do think that all that Kansas State provides in the backcourt, and the fact that this is a Kansas State team that is starting to clean up a little bit with regards to turnovers, still outside the top 200 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, but they've been able to do a solid job in terms of being able to hold things down from the 3-point line. This is an Indiana team that's been taking very good care of the ball. They're a top 30 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, but not really giving themselves second and third chances as well. I think that that's going to be just enough for the under. I do think that Kansas State holds in there. We'll take 8+ with Kansas State, and at a 156+, I'm in on the under. under. 637, 638 on the card. Cal Poly and Southeast Missouri State are doing battle from Walkup Skydome, and this is a game that is presently off the board as Cal Poly was in action yesterday, but I've got my handicap. I set Southeast Missouri State as a 2.5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay up to a deuce with them. 3 or more, take the points with Cal Poly, and then I set a total of a 162.5, 162 or less, and on the over 163 or higher, the under end. For Cal Poly, this is certainly a team that's looking to gun it. Last year, they were second in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Right now, they are number 9 in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And Southeast Missouri State has sped themselves up a little bit this year, 87th in terms of total possessions per game. I think that that's a little bit more of a byproduct of the fact that they've played some up-tempo teams. You play against a team like a St. Louis to begin the season. That was a little bit rough on them. I know that they've had quite a few other tests as well. You take a look at just getting bludgeoned by Iowa. That's not necessarily amazing. But that said, I do think that this is going to be a team that does a good job in terms of their overall versatility and guarding the three-point line. Last year, this was a top 50 team with regards to opponents' three-point shooting percentage. This year, that's gone up to about 35.5%. I think that they've been the victims of a little bit of bad variance, and I do think that they hold up there. This has also been a Southeast Missouri State team that's had a very rough time on the glass. You play against a Cal Poly team that they really don't have a lot of size. That's going to help them out. Right now, your top rebounder for Southeast Missouri State is Marquez Bell. He's like the only guy that gives you over 4 rebounds per game, and he only stands 6'3", a little bit of a, shall we say, grinder guy down low. 11 points, 5 boards, 2.5 assists. He's been a do-it-all sort of gadget guy. And then you bring back Braxton Secker, who's been in the program for quite a while. He's right now supplying the team with 13 points per game. Like the game of BJ Ward, who's been able to give you 10.5 points per contest. And the big thing for Southeast Missouri State, winning the turnover battle. Last year, they were a top 75 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They're right on track for that once again this year. And now they get to play a Cal Poly team that's outside the top 3 in terms of ball security. They've been turning the ball over 16.5 times per game. They are doing so to be able to get good looks from three-point range, as right now they're knocking down about 35.5% from 3, and you've had some international men of mystery who have been great for this team. Guzman Vasilic has come in. He's been able to give you 7.5 points and assists per contest. Good versatility, shooting over 40% from three-point range. You got Peter Benjai, your main guy back from a season ago, give you 15 points. He's shooting 36% from 3, and then Hamad Musa. How about this guy being able to supply 19 points per contest, shooting it well from 3 over at Dayton. He just couldn't find a lot of minutes, but at 6'8", he's been very versatile. It is a Cal Poly team that is quite a bit improved on the glass from a season ago as well. They're not allowing a lot of second and third chances. They've been a top 150 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, not grabbing a ton of offensive rebounds, but they are going to put you on the free throw line as well. They've been outside the top 225 in terms of opponent's three-point or free throw shooting percentage. So I do think that this is a very interesting spot, and this is a Cal Poly team that is having a little bit of a tough time down low outside the top 275 with their own two-point shooting percentage, outside the top 275 in terms of opponent's two-point shooting percentage. I think that allows Southeast Missouri State to get the job done here. One to lay up to 2 here with Southeast Missouri State. 3 or more taking the points with Cal Poly. 162.5 or less in on the over, 163 or higher the under. 639, 640 on the card. UC Irvine and New Mexico State are going to be doing battle from Hard Rock Arena, and right now with UC Irvine, Zots off for the Anteaters are 2.5-point favorites. 141 to 141.5 is the total, and with New Mexico State, I did set them as an underdog of 4 points, so I'm going to be willing to take a shot here on UC Irvine. Recognize that UC Irvine is in quite a bit of transition, but this is just a system that I very much trust in, as Russ Turner down for what always has this team firing all cylinders. Down low, they are once again one of the better rebounding teams in all of college basketball. You're bringing Kyle Evans, who he was a main reserve behind the likes of Ben Lyken and company a season ago, and he's really been one of your main men down low. He's been able to give you 10.5 points, 7 rebounds per game, but your top rebounder is actually Darren Sarin. He only stands 6'4". He was with the program 2 seasons ago, decided to go to Samford last year, couldn't find minutes there, but after he gave the team 10 points, 3.5 rebounds per game 2 seasons ago, he's back and he's done a nice job in terms of being that little bit of do-it-all gadget guy, and you've been able to get some good facilitation with him giving up 5 assists per game, and then you've got Tama Isaac, who's not going to be too much of a primary scorer with about 8 points per game, but he's filling out 4.5 boards, 4.5 assists per game, and I love what Jerian Dixon has been able to do. He's really your top scorer that returns from a season ago. Last year, he gave the team 8.5 points, shot about 33% for 3, currently shooting 46% for 3. I don't think that that's going to be withstanding, but he's been able to do a nice job in terms of facilitating some good, clean offense for an Irvine team that they've been a top 175 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. I think that they're going to be relentless against a New Mexico State team that they themselves last year were top 25 team in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage. Did a nice job hitting the board boards, but they lost so much size from a season ago. So Sayer Malonga is going to need to really step in. He comes over from East Carolina. He's been able to give you about 3.5 rebounds per game, but feels like he's just been dealing with a little bit of ailment as he hasn't been playing a ton of minutes, only about 16.5 minutes per contest. You do bring over a primary guy, though, in terms of scoring from Cal State Bakersfield, meet for the Roadrunners. Jamel Jones, 18 points, 5 boards. He's been able to do in the mid-30s from three-point range. And Julius Mims over at Idaho last year was a 6+ rebound per guy. He's right now giving you 9 boards per contest for New Mexico State. They're not generating a lot of offensive rebounds like they did a season ago, but they've been a top 100 team with regards to defensive rebound percentage. Like they did last year, they're cutting teams off from 3. Teams are shooting less than 30% from the outside, and I do think that this is going to be a bit more of a defense-oriented game, but neither of these teams are necessarily slugs either. With UC Irvine last year, they were about a mid-tier team in terms of total possessions per game. Right now, they're clocking in at about 102nd. You had a New Mexico State team that, as of right now, they're more around 363rd. They have really slowed things down to a crawl, but I think that this is going to be close enough for late game fouling. If you can beat this Irvine team, it's via the 3-point shot, and I do think that for New Mexico State, they find just enough 3-point shooting to help you out with the over, so I did set a total here of a 142. I do like this total over, but that's out with Irvine. I'm going to be willing to leave the numbers, set them as 4-point favorite. 641, 642 on the card. This is from Missoula, Montana. Oakland and Montana do battle. Game is off the board because both of these teams played yesterday, but I've got my handicap. I set Montana as a 3.5-point favorite. Willing to lay up to 3 with them, 4 more. Taking the points with Oakland, and then I did set a total of a 151.5. So 151 or less, and on the over, 152 or higher, the under. After Oakland was one of the slower teams in all of college basketball last season, a little bit more mid-tempo this year, and they've went the junior college route. They brought 3 guys in that were rated by JUCORecruiting.com's top 40, Zaire Wells, Coy Thurman, and Isaac Garrett, and Garrett has been the main guy in terms of scoring at 6'8", a little bit of a combo guy. He's able to pop it for 3, but hasn't done a lot of that. He's right now giving you about 16.5 points per contest, but big for this team is that Michael Hoagie, well, he began his career over at St. Peter's. He was rock solid over at Jacksonville State last year. Gave that team 8.5 points, 7.5 boards. He's finally out there on the floor after he missed the first 5 or so games of the season. He's going to be able to give you a little bit more rough and tumble to pair with Bari Navarua, who he comes back from a season ago. He's right now giving this team about 5 boards, a little bit under block per contest, and I do like the fact that they bring in a main facilitator in Brody Robinson. That's a big reason why the 3-point shooting that last year was outside the top 300 is really starting to come back up for Oakland. Typically, they are a solid 3-point shooting team, and Robinson has been able to shoot 44% from the outside, 4 assists, 14 points per game. And then on the other end from Montana, you've got Money Williams, who he has been absolutely spectacular for this team. 19.5 points, 4.5 boards, 4.5 assists. Big reason why they were able to go on the road and knock off UNLV last week. And then you were able to pair him up with some guys with versatility, like a 6'8" Dejan Sawyer. He's able to pop it from 3, hasn't necessarily been great there, but he's able to give you 9.5 points, 5 rebounds per game. A guy like a Brooklyn Hicks, he's been a little bit of a bowling ball sort of guy at 6'3". He comes in from UNLV, 11.5 points, 4 boards. He's been shooting 40% from 3. It is a Montana team that last year, they spent themselves up a little bit more than what you would expect. This is typically a Montana team that's a little bit more slow and controlled. They're currently at 52nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, so I do think that things are going to be tapering off a little bit. We saw that in their game against Lamar about 2 or so days ago, and this is a bunch in Montana that typically they do a good job of taking care of the ball. Right now, about 14.5 turnovers per game. They're not going to generate a lot of turnovers, and this is a Montana team that traditionally they just don't grab a lot of second chances. They're back outside the top 280 in terms of their rebound percentage on offense, but they've done a good job in terms of their perimeter defense this year. Teams are shooting less than 30% from 3-point range against them. This is a team that's going to be looking to play a lot of positionless basketball, and I do think that that's going to be pesteous against an Oakland team that is looking to pop it a little bit more from 3. I do think that Oakland is going to be able to do a little bit better job down low. In the end, I do think that with this game being played in Missoula, Montana, and with these teams on game number 3 in 3 days, that Montana wins out. So 151 or less, and on the over, 152 or higher, the under. With Montana, we'll lay up to 3 with them, 4 more taking the points with Oakland. 643, 644 on the card. Portland State is on the road against Utah Tech, and Utah Tech is right now finding themselves as a 2 to a 2.5 point underdog. So on this game, it is 148, and I did set my line at a 2, so 2.5 plus. I'm going to be willing to take the points with the Utah Tech. It's a team that is very much a work in progress. Typically, this is a Utah Tech team that's built around relatively good 3-point shooting, and as of right now, they're shooting 27.9% from 3-point range. Now, they're doing a great job of guarding the 3-point arc. Teams are shooting less than 30% from 3 against them, but you're noticing a little bit of changeover. They bring in Ethan Potter, who's a 6'8", little bit of a big man over at Utah Valley. He's been able to give this team some rough and tumble down low. 15.5 points, block and a half, 7.5 rebounds per game, and then you got Noah Belonga, who was over at St. Bonaventure last year, giving you about 11.5 points, 5.5 boards. So you've got a lot of guys that are doing a great job pulling in boards. As a matter of fact, out of your top 6 scorers, all but one of them at least 3.9 rebounds per game. And I think that that's going to be big against a Portland State team that they do bring back their top scorer from a season ago in Jalen Henderson, and he's been really ascending. How about 22 points per game? And then you've got a Portland State team that was in the top 75 in terms of offensive rebound percentage a season ago, and you've got a trio of guys, Keon Kenzie, Terry Miller, and Trayvon Minute, who have all been able to give you at least 7 rebounds per game. They're all about 6'7" to 6'9". Not a lot of versatility with Portland State. They're right now shooting 38.5% from 3. A little bit of a warped number, though, because they've went up against a few non-Division I teams like Evergreen State and Northwest Indian College, whatever that is, and they've really been able to put up some big numbers. And then when they face off against the Division I teams, they've been a little bit dwarfed. Now, this does seem like a Portland State team that's going to be willing to run a little bit more, and just under this current coaching regime, it's been up, down, all around. You really don't know what to expect out of them. They don't have as much of a main facilitator as when they had Q Myers a season ago. Right now, they're about 76th in the country, Portland State is, in terms of total possessions per game. Typically, Utah Tech is a team that looks to run it and gun it a little bit more as well. With Utah Tech right now, they're a little bit more mid-tempo, about 166, as they're looking to embrace a little bit more rebounding. But the big thing with Portland State, I mentioned it, they don't necessarily have that main facilitator. They have been outside the top 225 in terms of ball security, so I do think that that's going to be a little bit of an issue for them, and I do think that Utah Tech, on their old floor, they're going to be able to hold in there. And Portland State had massive issues at the free throw line a season ago. They're shooting about 70% as a collective right now. I think that that could be big in this game. So, did set a total here of a 150. I think that you get enough possessions for the over, and I do think you get some late game following with it being tight. I like the over, and at anything more than 2, take the points with Utah Tech. 645, 646 on the card. It is Georgia Southern, and they're going to be playing against UTSA. Meet me for the Roadrunners. This is a game that's off the board from Jacksonville, Florida, and I've got my handicap. I set Georgia Southern as a 3.5 point favorite. 1 to lay up to 3 with them. 4 more. Take the points with UTSA. Set a total of a 163.5. 163 or less in on the over. 164 or higher the under. UTSA under Austin Klotch, I really believe, is wanting to run. They entered into the day on Monday, 221st in terms of total possessions per game, but that's just not them. Austin Klotch go all the way back to his time over at Nichols. It seems they're looking to gun it. They're looking to generate a lot of turnovers, and you have a bunch on the flip side in Georgia Southern that they have been moving it. For Georgia Southern, 13th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And both of these teams are looking to generate turnovers, and Georgia Southern's been pretty solid at it. They're a top 35 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. You bring back Tyree Moore, who was the top scorer for them 2 years ago. Last year was at UAB. He's back. He's given the team 13 plus points per contest. And for UTSA, they lose that top scorer in Primo Spears from a season ago. Now you're looking to the Southern Utah transfer and Jameer Simpson to be able to give you production. 18.5 points right now, shooting 41% from 3-point range. And this has been a team that's actually been surprisingly good on the glass. They're grabbing 14 offensive rebounds per game, so they're getting those second and third chances, but they've been very pedestrian in the way that they've been generating turnovers. Now, to the credit of UTSA, top 55 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, so they're protecting the ball. They bring in some mix and match transfers like a guy, Austin Nunez, who was over at Ole Miss and Arizona State, never really found his footing there. He's been able to give the team about 10 points per contest. This is a team that doesn't necessarily have a ton of size, but you've got Babakar Njai along Caden Rayfield, who have been able to combine for about 14.5 to 15 rebounds per game. So Georgia Southern going to need to step up to the plate a little bit more there. But I do think that Georgia Southern, they've had a little bit of a tough time taking care of the ball. They are going to be able to hold up a little bit more down low because you've got 6'7" Alden Applewhite. Good versatility coming on over from Boise St. 11.5 points, 5.5 boards, career mid-33 point shooter. And then Nakavian White, he a season ago over at this program at 6'7", began his career at the junior college ranks. He supplied about 3.5 boards, 10.5 points, shot in the mid-30s from 3-point range. And even though Georgia Southern not quite the same rebounding team as UTSA not necessarily a team that's blessed with a whole bunch of size. And then you've got Spud Webb giving you 15.5 points per game as well for Georgia Southern, a team that I think is going to do a nice job in terms of winning the turnover battle and find some open looks from 3. 163 or less than on the over, 164 higher the under. Georgia Southern will lay up to 3 with them. 4 more, taking those points with UTSA. 647, 648 on the card. This is from the Chase Center out there in San Francisco. UCLA and Cal do battle. Cal is an 8 to an 8.5 point underdog. Total on this game, it is 142.5, and I did set my total 143.5, so I'm going to be in on the over. I do think that late game following can get you to the over here, and with Cal, I did set them as an underdog of 7.5 points, so I'm going to be willing to take a plus with them. UCLA has just been a little bit all over the place. They've been outside the top 50 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, so really nice expose a few days ago against Presbyterian. They just hosed the Blue Hose down as they won that game 86-46, and they just had a few random injuries to begin the season, like Eric Daly, Tyler Bildew, Donovan Dent. They've all dealt with a little bit of injury, being being out for a game apiece, and now you're getting them all out there on the floor, just being able to vibe off of one another, and that's big because Bonaventure, he comes over from New Mexico, one of the most up-tempo teams in all of college basketball, and now he's in a UCLA program that is typically outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game, and he's been able to dole out 6.5 assists per game. He's not really turning the ball over too much. It's a UCLA team that is turning the ball over about 12 times per game. That's a little bit more than what you'd expect, and typically UCLA, a top 50 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They're a half a step back from that thus far this season, but they're allowing teams to shoot less than 30% from three. This is typically a really good perimeter team, and this is a team with just a lot of versatility that have a lot of guys I think are going to do a rock solid job on the glass. Xavier Booker at about 6'10", comes over from Michigan State, top 25 recruit back in the day. He's been able to give you 10.5 points, 5.5 rebounds. You've got Tyler Bilodeau and Eric Daly, the Daily Show. Both of these guys right around about 6'8". They've been able to combine for 27 points, 9 boards, both shot in the high 30s from three last season, but I really like what this Cal team is doing. It's season number 3 under Mark Madison, and when he was over at Utah Valley, his teams were just really good at playing relatively up-tempo. They would typically be in the top 100 in terms of total possessions per game. They're a half a step back from that right now, but they play good, tenacious defense, and they would have some solid three-point shooting, and they've got that this year. John Camden comes over from Delaware. He's been able to give you about 15 points at 6'7", shooting in the high 30s from three, and this is not sustainable, but Data Ames, 19 points per game. He's right now shooting 53% from three-point range. It is a Cal team that has had a little bit of a tough time in terms of generating turnovers outside the top 150 with that regard, but they've been a top 150 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis despite playing against Kansas State in a game that got a little bit harebrained. They've been having a little bit of a tough time on the defensive glass outside the top 250 in terms of percentage of missed shots by opponents that result in an offensive rebound, but Lee Dort is able to give you 6.5 rebounds per game. Justin Pippen has been able to give you some nice versatility. He comes in, he's been able to give you about 13 points, 5 boards, 5 assists. We all know what his father was able to do, but that said, I do think the Cal holds in there. I think that this is going to be a control game, but I do think that you're going to get some good offensive execution on both sides. So here at a 143 or less in on the over, and I do like Cal getting 8+ here with regards to the side. 649, 650 on the card. It is Stony Brook and Bethune-Cookman. This is a game that is out there at Daytona Beach. Both of these teams played yesterday, so this is a game off the board, and I've got my handicap. I did set Stony Brook as a 3.5 point underdog, one lay up to 3 with Bethune-Cookman for more. Taking the points with Stony Brook, 145 or less, in on the over, 146 or higher, the under. I would set this line probably closer to like 1.5 if it weren't for the fact that this game is in Florida, and Bethune-Cookman is based out there in the great state of Florida. So that does help out Bethune-Cookman quite a bit in this spot, and for Bethune-Cookman, this is actually a very talented team. You bring in Ontario Morris, a former top 50 recruit that was over at Kansas and Texas, and he's been headlining things with giving this team 16 points per contest, while Jacoby Heady, he's been able to give you 16 points, 4 boards, 2.5 assists. Actually a boomerang transfer. He was over at Central Michigan a season ago along with his brother in Quinton Heady, and these two guys form a really nice dynamic duo. And then on the flip side of things, you do have yourself a Stony Brook team that they were just all sorts of awful last season. They had no guard play whatsoever. They were outside the top 275 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis, and they have turned their fortunes by bringing in Rob Brown, who is a nice double-figure scorer over at Nichols. He's right now shooting 39% from three, and Eric Pratt has been tremendous for this team. I recognize that Stony Brook had it taken to them yesterday by Pacific, but Mr. Pratt has been able to give 18 points, 2.5 assists. Right now he's shooting in the high 30s from three-point range, so these two guys have been able to elevate this offense. You don't necessarily have a ton of size down low, but Richard Goods does deliver the goods down low. He comes on over from Hampton, and he's been able to give this team right about 6 rebounds per game, 6'9", a little bit of a stronger guy. And then Olge Kojenets, who comes over from Wyoming, he's a true 7-footer that's able to give you some three-point shooting. Not necessarily a great three-point shooter, but he's able to give you that versatility as well. It is a Stony Brook team that is still having a little bit of a tough time taking care of the ball, and when Bethune-Cookman was firing all cylinders 2 seasons ago, they were actually a top 20 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Not quite back to that this season. You just don't have that sort of a roster without having someone like Zion Harmon like you had back in the day, but Ariel Bland, I think that there's a lot of upside with him. Entered in yesterday only averaging about 4 points, 5 rebounds per game, but go back to when he was over at UC Santa Barbara 2 seasons ago. He was a guy that in the Big West was able to give that team like 6 points, 6 boards, a block. He was able to also shoot 40% from 3 at 6'7". He's got some good versatility there, so I do think that in the end, this Bethune-Cookman team should be a little bit of a favorite. Do have to be cautious of the fact that they shoot less than 65% of the free throw line, so that could come into play with regards to a cover spot. 3 or less one lay of Bethune-Cookman, 4 more. I think the points with Stony Brook, and then I do think that both of these teams, when it's all said and done, are going to be relatively mid-tempo teams. You've got a Bethune-Cookman team that entered into yesterday in terms of total possessions per game more in the neighborhood about 130th in all of college basketball. Stony Brook was really, really slow last season, and right now for Stony Brook this season, we're around about 328th in terms of total possessions per game. I think that bumps up a little bit, so 145 or less in on the over, 146 or higher the under, 1 to lay up to 3 with the Bethune Cookman. 4 more, take the points with Stony Brook, 651, 652 on the card. Pacific is going to be playing against Jacksonville from the great state of Florida, and despite it being in Florida, I said Pacific as a 6.5 point favorite, 6 or less, 1 to lay with Pacific, 7 or more, take the points with Jacksonville, and then I said a total of a 142.5 with this total, 142 or less, in on the over, 143 or higher the under. Jacksonville, because they lose so many pieces from a season ago, including Robert McRae, who they ran everything through, they are going back to the slow and controlled style that Mincy had when he first took over the Jacksonville job. They're currently outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, you got a Pacific team that is a little bit more mid-tempo. They're about 192nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but with Pacific, I do think that they went a really, really good route with bringing in Dave Smart, who was coaching it over at Carleton College in Canada 2 seasons ago. He brought with him his main guy in Elias Ralph, and he has been tremendous this year, over 15 points per contest. He's hauling in their 7 boards. This is a team that's leaving a little bit of something to be desired from three-point range. Entering into the day on Monday, they're shooting about 33.5% from three-point range, but even though they lose a few versatile pieces from the backcourt from a season ago, they did a nice job of being able to reload. The big thing is I want to see them give Alexis Marmioles, who comes out over from Lamar, a little bit more of a chance. He entered in yesterday only averaging 6.5 points per contest over at the Southland last season. He was more of a 15-point per game guy, but you do have a nice head of the sink in Jaden Clayton. He was one of the top players in terms of generating turnovers at Maine last season. Not going to be too much of a primary score, about 9 points per contest. He was at 7.5 points per game last season, but he's able to dole out over 5 assists per game. He's able to generate a steal, and he's able to find other guys in state, like a TJ Wainwright. As Wainwright, he last season over at Long Beach State was about a 40% three-point shooter. He was able to find his footing yesterday. He's been able to give the team double figures, and this is a Pacific team that does need to cut down on the 13 turnovers per game, but they themselves are doing a little bit of a better job of being able to generate turnovers. And this is a Jacksonville team that when they've been firing all cylinders, typically it's been due to the front court, which they just don't have a ton of that this season. And that backcourt play, it just very much is in transition right now. They've been utilizing Evan Strecker, who's a freshman, as their main point guard, giving out about 4 assists per contest. And then you really have only 2 guys that are giving you more than 8.5 points per game. Jalen Jones, who was a little bit of a flop over at Oakland last season 2 years ago at Tennessee State. He was shooting in the mid-30s from 3. He was able to give that team some production. And then Chris Arias has been able to give you 13.5 points, 3.5 assists. He was a relatively solid freshman for this team last season, so he's been in the system for a few seasons. You're looking at someone like Jason Thirdkill, who began his career over in the Southland, went down to the non-D1 ranks. He's been able to give you about 4 or so rebounds per game. And even though the team doesn't necessarily have that one main rebounder, they've actually been able to do a solid job on the glass. They face off against a few non-Division I teams, though, that have very much warped the numbers, and the 15 turnovers per game are a big issue. So I set Pacific as a 6.5 point favorite, 1 to lay up to 6 with them, 7 or more taking the points with Jacksonville, 142 or less on the over, 143 or higher the under. Now we head out to the ESPN events tournament that is out there in Florida as well. 653, 654. Liberty Bibberty is going to be facing off against Towson. No numbers up on this game, but I've got my handicap. I set Liberty as a 4.5 point favorite, 1 to lay up to 4 with them, 5 or more taking the points with Towson, 136 or less on the over, 137 or higher the under. And get ready for a turtle race, kids, because neither of these teams are playing very up-tempo. Both of these teams entered in the day on Monday outside the top 350 in terms of total possessions per game. But with Liberty, they've gotten past a 75-point plateau at every one of their games against Division I foes because they are absolutely as hot as lava from three-point range right now. Not including the game that we saw against Vermont, which I think that they shot something like 40% from 3. They entered in the day shooting 46% from 3, and Brett Decker Jr. entered into the day shooting like 20 of 32 from 3, and I think he went 5 of 6 from distance. It's absolutely ridiculous. I do think that there's going to be a little bit of Coolidge with this three-point shooting. Last year, they shot about 38.5% from 3, and I don't think that it's far-fetched that they shoot 40% as a collective for the year. 46% is a little bit obscene, though, but they've got good versatility of Zach Cleveland. He's saying 6 of 7, 10.5 points, 10 boards, 8 assists entering in the day yesterday. He's been able to do a nice job as a little bit of point forward for this team. You've got Caden Matheny, who's been able to give you 15 points per contest. Colin Porter, nice double-figure scorer that returns from a season ago, but this is a Towson team that I think is going to be built to be able to hold in there. It's a Towson team that's built a little bit more down low rather than through the perimeter, but they're allowing teams to shoot less than 30% from three-point range. Towson, once again, back in the top 50 with regards to their rebound percentage. They themselves have been a little bit cold from 3. They're shooting less than 30% from 3, but you bring back your main 2 guards from season ago, Dylan Williamson, Tyler Tejada. They entered in the day yesterday, averaging a combined about 30 points per contest. Jack Dombia, who comes over from Wright State, he's been missing right down low with about 7 7 rebounds per game, as they did lose some of those big men from a season ago, but you've been able to get some nice ancillary, shall we say, production out of someone like a Chike Ndofu. He's a guy that has come up from the non-D1 ranks at 6'7". He's been able to give you a few rebounds. They've dealt with the injury to Jaden Cole. That's been hurting this backcourt a little bit, but this is a Hausa team that's just very much built around good, solid defense. They're not going to generate turnovers. They're just going to get up in your grill. I do think that they're going to be causing this Liberty team a little bit of strife, and I think that you get a very low possession game here. So I set a line to where I'm going to be willing to lay up to 4 with Liberty, 5 or more taking the points with Towson, and then 136 or less, and on the over, 137 or higher, the under, 655, 656 on the card. This is Vermont, and they are going to be taking on Rhode Island. And Rhode Island, I set as a 2-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 1.5 with them, 2.5 or more, taking the points with Vermont, and then set a total of a 142, 141.5 or less, and on the over, 142.5 or higher, the under end with Vermont. They have spent each of the last 9 years outside the top 275 in terms of total possessions per game. Rhode Island was really looking to gun it last year. This season, they are more around about 260th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Now, with this Vermont defense, they've taken a little bit of a setback on defense. They had that rough go of it in terms of guarding the three-point arc yesterday against Liberty, but a lot of teams are going to be doing so. But still, they had some tough goes of it against non-D1 competition to begin the season. Overall for Vermont, they entered in yesterday 259th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. It's a Rhode Island team that has been all over the place under Archie Miller. They're actually a top 100 team right now in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but there's just something about this team that I don't necessarily trust. They lose so much of their good rebounding, like David Futures and company from a season ago, so they've been looking very much to getting a lot down low out of Muhammad. So who comes over from St. Peter's. He's been able to give you about 5.5 rebounds per game, and then Tyler Cochran, who was over at Toledo a few seasons ago. He's been a nice do-it-all sort of player, 59 points, 6 boards entering into yesterday. And Jonah Hinton is hitting it hard. He was over at St. Bonaventure a season ago. He was able to supply that team with some good scoring, and this season he's been able to give the team about 15 points per game. But Rhode Island very much leaving something to be desired in terms of that perimeter shooting. Right now, this is a squad that as a whole, they're shooting less than 32.5% from three-point range. And on the flip side of things, you do have a Vermont team that they've got TJ squared as TJ Hurley along TJ Long. Both of these guys have been able to combine for over 30 points per contest, and with Long last season, he was limited to like 5 games due to injury, and he's been able to come back. He's been able to give this team 17 plus points per contest. And Gus Yalden, 6'9" big man that began his career over at Wisconsin and Seton Hall, he's making a big difference for this team. As Vermont, they typically just don't do a great job in terms of giving themselves second and third chances. They're probably not going to once again this season, but that said, he has stepped in, and in his first 3 games, he's been averaging about 17 points per contest. He's been able to give you about 5 rebounds per game. He's a real X factor. And then you've got Noah Barnett, a guy that has been within the system for a few years now, was a little bit more of a priority to reserve. Season ago at 6'9", he's been able to pull in there about 4 to 4.5 rebounds per game. I think that you get a little bit of sloppier game, but I do think that this is going to be a game close enough for late game following. And this is a Vermont team that's shooting over 40% from 3, albeit part of that is going up against non-D1 teams, but at a line of 1.5 or less, one to lay with Rhode Island, 2.5 or more, take the points with Vermont, 141.5 or less, and on the over, 142.5 or higher, the under, 657, 658 on the card. Another game without numbers as UC San Diego and Bradley do battle from the great state of Florida. I've got my handicap. I set Bradley as a 3-point dog, so 2.5 or less, willing to lay with UC San Diego, 3.5 or more, taking those points with Bradley, and then set a total of a 143. At a 142.5 or less, I'm in on the over, 143.5 or higher, the under. With Bradley, we've seen them take quite a bit of a fall off with regards to their 3-point shooting thus far this season, but I do think that it should rebound a little bit. Like Corey Thomas last year was shooting in the high 30s from 3, and he entered into yesterday shooting less than 25% from the outside. They certainly were able to take it to a Princeton team that just frankly is not very good this year. I wish I could call it anything else, but it does appear as though Bradley is looking to go a little bit more down low as well. You've got a true 7'1" big man, and you met Janovic. He does a good job in terms of combining with he and Timothy Van Der Knapp, hopefully I said that correct, in terms of combining for about 8 or so rebounds per game. It is a Bradley team that yesterday went 14 of 30 from 3, but still below 30% from the outside. But I like what AJ Smith is able to bring to the table as well. Guy that's been around the block, was over at James Madison last season. He's a guy that is not necessarily going to light you up from 3, but he does a good job being able to pull in there some rebounds. Last year was able to give that team 6+ rebounds per contest, and the big key for Bradley, being able to take care of the ball. UC San Diego last year, they were a top 10 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and while they're a different looking team this season, you lose your coach in Coach Olin from the offseason. You do bring in Clint Allard. He was on that staff from a season ago, and they do go up against a Riley team that has been pretty rock solid in terms of taking care of the ball. They're only turning the ball over about 10.5 times per contest, but for UC San Diego, we saw them have a nice expose yesterday against Temple. You've got a few holdovers from last year. It's mainly a lot of newer guys, like an Alex Shulkin, who comes over from Lafayette, where last year he shot over 45% from three-point range. Bold and hopefully I said that correct, he comes over from Portland. He's a guy that has versatility at 6'11", is able to pop it from three-point range, gives this team more rebounding than what they had a few seasons ago, but it's really all been about Leo Beth. This guy's giving you over 17 points, 5 boards, 6'8", little bit of a do-it-all sort of player. He went 4 of 5 from three-point range yesterday, and this is a UC San Diego team that I think when it's all said and done, they're going to be relatively mid-tempo, and I do sense this Bradley team, after they were one of the best three-point shooting teams in all of college basketball, again, they've taken a little bit of setback this season to be a little bit more slow tempo. Typically, Brian Wardle teams, they do try to pride themselves on the defensive side of things right now for Bradley. In terms of total possessions per game, they're checking in about 283rd, so 142.5 for less than on the over, 143.5 for higher the under, 108 to 2.5 with UC San Diego, 3.5 for more. Taking the points with Bradley. 659, 660 on the card. Princeton and Temple do battle in the ESPN Invitational. I said Temple is an 8-point favorite. 1 to lay up to 7.5 with them, 8.5 for more, taking the points with Princeton, and then set a total to where 143.5 for less, and on the over 144.5 for higher, the under. This is a Princeton team that just is not what they once were, and they're actually speeding up from a season ago, which I don't understand. They entered into yesterday 149th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. After they were outside the top 300 last year, you lose your main point guard in Xavier Lee. You pretty much lose your top 3 scorers. Dalen Davis is the main holdover from a season ago. He's been able to give this team double figures, but you don't have what you had from a season ago. You're looking at guys like CJ Happy and company to be able to pick it up, and, well, they're not making it so Happy or Hoppy. I think his last name is actually, it is Happy, to say the least, but man, for this Princeton team, they're never going to pull in there a lot of second and third chances. They're not going to be a team that does a great job of getting to the free throw line. They're all about ball control, and they just have lost their way this season. And now they go up against a Temple team that is going to be relatively low tempo. They're typically outside the top 200 in terms of total possessions per game. You've got Adam Fisher, who he was a disciple under Micah Shrewsbury over there at Penn State. It's all about relatively good ball control, popping it from 3, so a lot of the characteristics that you'll find from the Princeton offense, and Temple just runs it better. They entered into yesterday shooting over 38% from 3. They lose that game to UC San Diego, but they were still able to put up their points. You've got Ada and Tobiasen, who's back from a season ago, along Darren, built for tough. These two guys have been able to combine for about 35 to 36 points per game. Now, they don't necessarily have a ton down low. Your main guy has been Babatunde Doradola, who's been able to, as a 6'8", little bit of a big man, give you about 5 boards. He does throw in there 2 assists per game as well. Could use a little bit more out of Messiah Gilliard. They really featured him yesterday after he was mainly coming off the bench in the first few games. Comes over from Manhattan, where he gave that team 11.7 boards as a 6'3", get your nose dirty sort of guard. And for Temple, they do a great job in terms of taking care of the ball. Entering into yesterday, 7.5 turnovers per game. Now, UC San Diego is one of the more harebrained and more insane defenses in terms of generating turnovers, and even with facing that defense, they only turned the ball over 7 times. So I do think that Temple should be able to take it to this Princeton team. I set a line of 8, so we'll only up to 7.5 here with Temple, 8.5 for more, taking the points with Princeton, and then 143.5 for less than on the over, 144.5 for higher the under. Now we head out to lovely Las Vegas for 661, 662 on the card. This is Rutgers, and they're going to be playing against Notre Dame. Notre Dame does find themselves as a 5.5 to a 6.5 point favorite. 142.5 to 143.5 is the total, and I did set a total of a 138. I'm going to be in on the under. It's a Rutgers team that they just got completely destroyed against Tennessee yesterday, and for Rutgers, that defense was not so great, but they're getting back to their old ways. They're more of a mid-tempo team right now, and they've been relying upon Dylan Grant along Tyreek Francis to really get the offense going. Francis, a transfer from NJIT, is giving you about 3.5 assists, 15 points per contest for a squad that going into yesterday, not great, not awful from 3-point range, shooting about 34.5% from the outside. They go up against a Notre Dame team that has been a top 75 unit in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and though Notre Dame did not get the job done yesterday against Kansas, the defense was still relatively respectable, albeit against a short-handed Kansas team, and for Notre Dame, much better on the glass this year. They're not allowing a lot of second and third chances, with Carson Tout being able to reel in there over 10 rebounds per contest. Marcus Burton is back to his old ways. He's been able to give the team 20 points per game, a little bit less facilitation than he had a season ago, so you're going to need to have some of these ancillary guards to be able to step up, like a Brandon Shrewsbury, who didn't have the world's greatest game yesterday. You've got a guy in Sir Muhammad, who's been doing a little bit of everything, coming off the bench at 6'6", 5.5 points, 3 boards, 2 assists. like what he's able to bring to the table. And this is a Rutgers team that they're going to need to hit the boards a little bit harder as well, because Tout has been one of the better rebounders in all of college basketball thus far, and you've got Emmanuel Ogbonbole, who's been able to give you about 7 or so rebounds per contest, and with Dylan Grant, he's been able to do a nice job in terms of reeling in there some boards as well at 6'8", with about 6.5 rebounds per game. But that said, this is still a Rutgers team that's a little bit rough with their free throw shooting. They've taken good care of the ball, less than 12 turnovers per game, but this is a Notre Dame team that's not really going to be forcing the issue there. I do think that this is going to be a slow and control game. Notre Dame back outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game, so set a total of 138. I'm in on the under end with this Rutgers squad. Made them a 4-point dog. I think that they hold in there. I'm willing to take those points. 663, 664 on the card. Iowa State and Creighton do battle. Creighton an 8.5 to a 9.5 point dog. 150.5 to a 151.5 is the total, and I said Iowa State as an 8-point favorite, so at an 8.5 plus, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Creighton. Blue Jays, in my opinion, fought relatively hard against Baylor yesterday, but this is a little bit of a work in progress offense that just doesn't have that go-to guy, unlike they've had in the past, as you've been able to have someone like a Jackson McAndrew at 6'10", be able to provide a little bit of versatility. They certainly take a little bit of a setback with regards to that rim protection without having that chopbucker like Ryan Kochbrenner from a season ago, but you do have Owen Freeman still trying to be able to get his just bearings about him with this system. He and Josh Hicks both come on over from Iowa, and for Owen Freeman yesterday, very, very pedestrian performance. He's averaging about 9 points, 5 rebounds per contest. It's actually been Blake Harper who's been able to step up and has been the main man in terms of scoring. He's been able to fly this team with about 12 points, throwing in there just under 7 rebounds per contest. So these guys are all working in tandem, and this is a team that's going further into the bench. Even these guys like in Isaac Traub, Freder Zuzic, they've been able to see a few quality minutes, and for Iowa State, this is a team that's built around generating turnovers. Each of the last 3 years, they've been a top 20 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis and in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're getting much more scoring this year. Jamon Lipsby entered into yesterday with about 19 points per game. Iowa State probably not going to be an amazing 3-point shooting team. You don't have Milan Mimosilovic, who's shooting over 40% from 3, but this is a team that's just built around horsepower, and they're a little bit of a better low-post team than they have been in the past, with having Joshua Jefferson just doing all that he's doing. 15 points, 7 boards. He last year actually gave the team 2 steals per contest. They actually won the rebound battle against St. John's yesterday, which that's not an easy feat. And for this Iowa State team, a little bit of an X factor is Nate Heise, who's been in the program for the last few seasons, began his career for Northern Iowa. Nice 7-point performance yesterday, and I like the game of Blake Buchanan as well. But I do think that Creighton, after a little bit of a rough go of it yesterday, they bounce back in a game that I think is going to be relatively mid-tempo. Iowa State, I don't think is going to be super duper fast or super duper slow, and Creighton has been struggling a little bit on offense, so set a total of a 148. I like the under, and with Creighton at 8.5 plus, going to be able to take those points. 665, 666 on the card. It is Kansas and Syracuse doing battle from lovely Las Vegas. Syracuse a 4.5 to a 5-point dog. Total on this game between 147.5 to a 148.5. Set a total of 142. I'm in on the under. Syracuse entered into yesterday number 1 in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and playing against Houston, that rises that number a little bit, but when it's all said and done, I can't see the metrics as of right now, but they're still going to be a top 15 team entering into this game in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and I actually feel like less has been more with them, and by that I mean J.J. Starlin has been dealing with a little bit of an injury. He comes back in that game against Houston, and he had 11 points, but the defense has actually risen up quite a bit. They've learned to play without him. You've got William Kyle down low, give you about 8+ rebounds per game. You've had this team doing a nice job of mixing and matching with Kion Anthony being able to give you double figures. That is the son of Carmelo Anthony, and I do think that their 3-point shooting is going to be a little bit better. Nate King's last season when he was over at Oregon State, he was bombing it at 44.5% from 3, and he's shooting like 25% from distance this season, so I do think that they're going to be able to do a nice job there. And Syracuse has been a top 30 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and they do face off against a Kansas squad that is certainly in a lot of transition. They don't have Darren Peterson out there, but even without Darren Peterson, this has been a defense that has been able to hold up at the point of attack, top 40 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, despite playing a very tough early season schedule, and they're going to have the best low post player in this game. And I do think that George, on the flip side for Syracuse, the way that he's able to facilitate Nathan George 5+ assists per game, and Donnie Freeman, his versatility is solid, but you've got the best low post presence in Flory Badunga for this Kansas team. He's giving you 2+ blocks, 7+ rebounds per game, and then Bryson Tiller has been able to show a lot of good versatility as well. He had 17 points in the game yesterday against Notre Dame. He's been able to supply about 10 to 11 points at 6'11". He's actually able to pop a few threes as well. They're going to be looking a lot to Melvin Council and Trey White in the backcourt. White has been that main scorer with about 14 points in terms of the guard play, and Council, he's done a nice job dishing it out. He's giving out about 5.5 assists per game, a little bit of a do-it-all 6'4" guard. I do think that Kansas, even though they're without Peterson, they do a nice job down low. I think that this is going going to be a very defense-oriented game, and Kansas has slowed down to being outside the top 260 in terms of total possessions per game. So set my line at 6. I'm going to be willing to lay with Kansas. Made a total of 142, so I'm in on the under. 667, 668 on the card. It is St. John's, and they're going to be playing against Baylor, and Baylor finds themselves as a 4.5 point underdog. Total's 162.5. I did set a total here of a 155.5. I like the under. Now for St. John's, they are playing at warp speed once again. Even though they were so great on defense last year, they were a top 50 team in terms of total possessions per game. They've sped themselves up once again this season, and when it comes to this Baylor squad, it's going to be interesting to see where they land with regards to tempo entering into the game against Creighton. In terms of total possessions per game, right around about 100th in the country. Last year they were a little bit slower. 2 years ago they were a little bit faster, and Scott Drew is a little bit of a chameleon of a coach. He sort of is able to meld things around his guys, but I do think that St. John's flat out is going to be able to win the battle down low. Baylor entered into yesterday outside the top 200 with regards to rebound percentage, and Zuby Ejiofor should really be able to take it to them for a St. John's team that you also now bring in a guy in Dylan Mitchell who's able to give you some plus rebounds per game. It is still a backcourt with St. John's that leaves a little bit of something to be desired, so turnovers are a bit of an issue, but this is not a Baylor team that's going to be going out there and going to be generating 100 billion turnovers or anything like that, but you've got Tonde Yusufu, who's been able to give this team double figures, and he's shooting it well from 3, and this is a Baylor team that it feels like they're getting back to what they had a few seasons ago when they made the title, and then they made another nice run in the NCAA tournament, and they were one of the better three-point shooting teams in all of college basketball. For St. John's, they're a little bit stronger with regards to post play rather than the guard play, as they're still sort of looking for that main facilitator. I feel like Dylan Darling is starting to take over that role. He's been able to give the team over 4 assists per game, but you do have a do-it-all guy in Bryce Hopkins that very much impresses me. I mean, prior to him getting hurt a few seasons ago at Providence, he was a guy that for that 2022-23 season gave that team 15.5 points, 8.5 boards, 2.5 assists, and he's doing that once again here over at St. John's. And for St. John's, the three-point shooting is much better than it was a season ago. Jusan Sadan, 40+% three-point shooter over at Arizona State. Ian Jackson, nice shooter over at North Carolina. These guys all come to the fold, and I do think that it's just going to overwhelm this Baylor team a little bit, and I do think that the St. John's defense holds up in a little bit more of a mid-tempo game. Semi-total 155.5. I'm in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 5 here with St. John's, 669, 670 on the card. It is Tennessee, and they're going to be playing against Houston out in lovely Las Vegas. Houston is a 2.5 to a 3.5 point favorite. Total on this game, it is 134.5, and I made a total of a 133. I'm in on the under, especially with Houston going into overtime yesterday. I do think that they're going to be looking to play slow and controlled, and for Tennessee, slow and controlled is probably good for them because they've had a tough time taking care of the ball outside the top 230 in terms of turnovers per possession. Now, offense very much got online yesterday against Rutgers, a Rutgers team that, man, it's not great to say the least what we are seeing out of them. And with the Tennessee team, you do have Jacoby Gillespie turning the ball over a little bit more than what you'd like, but that said, he's still been able to do a nice job giving the team double figures. And for Nate Ament, he's just not really been able to give you a lot of three-point shooting, but he's averaging over 17 points per game. He's able to pull in there some boards at 6'10", some good overall versatility there. And then with this Tennessee team, you've got a lot of depth with regards to what you get down low, as Felix Zapara has been able to give you a block. He's giving you 6+ rebounds per game. JP Estrella, it appeared as though his injury was going to be worse than what it was. 10 points in 10 minutes yesterday. That's good. Ethan Berg is giving you some solid minutes. So you've got a lot of depth up and down the boulevard. And for Houston, they're looking to break in a little bit of a new backcourt, but it looks like Kingston Flemings, he's certainly going to be able to take over that alpha dog role, as he's been very good with regards to scoring, giving this team 15+ points per contest from three-point range. He's been shooting darn near 50% from the outside. That should cool down, but you still have a nice facilitator, Lon Flemings, and Milo Suzan. He just embraces his role. He's taking a little bit more of a backseat this season, but he still gives you 4 assists. He's still a very efficient three-point shooter, and Chris Senek down low I think is going to be able to hold his own. He's been able to give this Houston team 8+ rebounds per game, and you still have Joseph Tugler doing a nice job with his shot blocking. Houston always loves to slow it down, always outside the top 3 in terms of total possessions per game, and I do think that for Houston, they, despite going to overtime yesterday in Tennessee, having a little bit of an easier time of it, find a way to get the job done in a rough and tumble battle between two teams that I expect to be in the top 20 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Semi-total 133, like the under, and with Houston, made them the 5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number, 671, 672 on the card. It is Auburn, and they're going to be playing against Michigan, and Michigan finds themselves as a 3.5 point favorite. So on this game between 158.5 to 159.5, and I did set my total at a 158.5, so 159.5 is my buy point on the under. For Auburn, this has been a team that's been in the top 75 in terms of total possessions per game, and what they've been able to get out of Keyshawn Hall, just absolutely incredible. Going into yesterday, 23.5 points, 11.5 boards, 2.5 assists at 6'7", shooting over 50% from three. Now, that's going to be taking a little bit of a fall, and as he's been able to ascend Todd Pettiford, who a lot of people thought was going to be one of the main guys, I mean, he's still giving the team 10 points per game. You've actually got 7 different guys for the team if you include Simon Walker, who's only played in one game. That would be able to give you 10 plus points per contest, but I mean, he's been a little bit more of a background guy for the team thus far this season, and I do think that for Michigan, the overall size is going to be able to really win out for them because you do have Keyshawn Murphy for this Auburn team who's been able to give you 6+ rebounds per game. But with Michigan, you've got the Axel Lindeborg, who really hasn't truly gotten going for them going into yesterday. 15 points, 8 boards. I actually expect a little bit more out of him. But Ade Mara, he's saying 7'3". He's been able to average a double-double for this unit. It feels like the offense is a little bit cleaner with bringing in Elliot Kadu, who does a nice job in terms of not turning it over. Nabari Burnett has been in the program for a few years. He's been able to give you double figures. And Morris Johnson doing a tremendous job just with a little bit of scoring, a little bit of rebounding. It is a Michigan team that's still turning the ball over a little bit more than what you'd like, and this has been an Auburn team that's been solid in terms of generating turnovers. And for this Auburn team, they themselves have been able to do a nice job in terms of flowing good, clean offense, only turning the ball over about 9.5 times per game. And I do think that that's going to be just enough for them to stay lively in this game. I think that this is going to be a nip and tuck game. I set my line at 2.5, so at 3+, won't take the points with Auburn. 159 or higher. I'm in on the under. 673, 674 on the card. It is Maryland, and they're going to be taking on Gonzaga, and Gonzaga is a 13.5 point favorite. Your total on this game, it is 155.5, and I said Gonzaga's a 10.5 point favorite. I'm going to be one take the points with Maryland. It is a Maryland team that's been dealing with a whole bunch of injuries. Miles Rice has been in and out of the lineup. You've had Solomon Washington not play a single game going into yesterday to begin the season, so that's been a little bit rough for this team, but now they're starting to get a lot of those pieces back into the fold, and that's a big reason why I'm going to be one to take a shot on a Buzz Williams system that just always embraces good, solid defense going into the game yesterday. Don't have to do this prior to the game wrapping up because that was a late game. They were a top 65 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and a team that has done an amazing job of getting to the free throw line. Top 10 team in all of college basketball in terms of free throw attempts per possession, and you do have some very good size and versatility. Pharrell Payne give you 18 points, 6.5 boards. He follows on with Buzz Williams from Texas A&M. You've had David Hewitt come in, and he's been able to supply the team with 18.5 points per contest. Rice, getting him back, that is big. And then you've got a guy in Isaiah Watts, who last season he was pretty rock solid over at Washington State. Not necessarily like a lighted up scorer or anything like that. At Washington State, he was averaging about 11 points per contest, but he had 6'3". He's able to pop it from three, and he gives you a little bit of facilitation. He's able to generate a steal and a half per contest as well. And for Gonzaga, this is a much improved defense. I recognize that they gave up points yesterday against Alabama, but that's merely because you get a whole bunch of possessions in that game. But for Gonzaga, even with going up against Alabama, going up against Creighton, you go up against Oklahoma, still a top 35 team. There's points allowed on a per possession basis. Graham Ike has been able to give you 16 plus points, 8 plus rebounds per game. Ty Graham Foster always struggles with a 3-point shot, but he's able to give you 15 points, 7 boards, a steal, a block. He just does a little bit of everything. And then you do have those shooters that you need, like an Adam Miller, shot 40% from three over at Arizona State a season ago. Braden Huff has been very rock solid for this team over the last few seasons at 6'10". Doesn't necessarily shoot it well from three, but he has the presence of being able to pop it from three while giving you about 5 rebounds per game. I do think that Gonzaga should be able to get it done, but Maryland is getting healthy at the right time, and I think that this is going to be much more of a defense-oriented game than a lot of people are expecting. Somebody told 150.5, especially in a back-to-back spot, in on the under and the points with Maryland. 675, 676 on the card. It is Oregon, and they're going to be playing against San Diego State. San Diego State is a 1.5 point underdog to this game. It is 143.5 to 144.5. I set a total of here of a 138.5. I like the under with San Diego State. Now you're getting back Magoon Gwath. That is so big. A guy that was able to put in there 2 blocks per contest a season ago. A 7-footer that's able to pop it from 3-point range as well. The metrics are very much warped for San Diego State right now in terms of total possessions per game because they played that game against Troy where it went to double overtime. And when you play 10 more minutes in a game than you're expected, that's going to raise the amount of possessions in that game. But that said, you've got Reese Waters back from 2 seasons ago where he was a big part of that team that made the deep NCAA tournament run. He's been able to come back and give this team, going into yesterday, 15.5 points, 6 rebounds per game. Farrell Compton, Jeremiah Oden coming off the bench are very rock solid. So I have a few question marks with Taj DeGoroville, but still, you had Miles Bird do a nice job in terms of getting the team double figures as well. But that said, I did have to set here the Oregon Ducks as a 2.5-point favorite. You can tell that even though Jackson Shellset was able to return from injury much sooner than expected, he only missed one game, and he was still being hampered by that a little bit, and that's a big reason why this Oregon team is currently outside the top 150 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They're outside the top 200 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, but you've had TK Simpkins come on over from Elon. He's been able to do a nice job of being able to supply the team with 15-plus points per contest, take a little bit of the load off of them. Now for Oregon, they need to clean up the 18 turnovers that we saw in their game against Auburn. But this is a San Diego State team that, even though they're always a really, really good defense, sometimes with regards to turnovers, they don't generate a ton of them. They're good, but they're not amazing at generating turnovers. I think that Nate Biddle is going to hold his own against Magoon Gwyeth last year, 15.5 points, 7.5 boards, block and a half per contest. And the key for this Oregon team, getting Sean Stewart unlocked, as he had himself a relatively good performance off the bench yesterday for this team. But this is a guy that was a very highly touted recruit going to Duke last season over at Ohio State. A starter that gave the team 5.5 points, 5.5 boards. That allows them to be able to win the battle down low. I think that this is going to be a grinder of a game. You've got an Oregon team that's currently outside the top 200 in terms of total possessions per game. San Diego State always embraces good, tough defense. So set a total of 138.5, like the under with Oregon. Willing to lay up to a deuce with them. 677, 678 on the card. It is Alabama, and they're going to be playing against the UNLV from Lovely, Las Vegas. Right now, UNLV, a 13.5-point dog. 181.5 is the total, and set mine at a 175. I'm going to be in on the under, and for this UNLV team, they've just been dealing with a whole bunch of injuries. Going into the game yesterday, you've had Miles Shea just be really banged up. He has yet to hit the floor for this team. It appears as though Emmanuel Stephen just might not be hitting the floor at all. And then Lajay Dembele, he was a starter for the team in the first 3 games, nowhere to be seen over the last few. So now you're relying upon Kamani Hamilton, who was a nice player over at High Point last season. He's been supplying the team with 14 points, 5 boards, 2.5 assists per game at 6'7", to really be doing a little bit of everything. Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn has been a nice scorer as well, coming over from Illinois. He's been able to give you 15-plus points per contest. And for UNLV, this has been a top 75 team, but towards points scored on a per possession basis, they're mainly built around getting to the free throw line. They're a top 10 team in the country in terms of percentage of points that do come from made free throws. And I do think that with this Alabama defense, even though not great, once again outside the top 125 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, that they're going to do a good job in terms of not hacking away. This is an Alabama team that, though they are going to be playing very, very fast, they're going to be obviously looking to run it in a back-to-back spot like this. And with this being a body clock game, this is going to be a game that starts at midnight Eastern time. I do think that they might slow things down just a half a hair, but I do think that the overall just guard play of Alabama is able to win out because you've got depth of guards. You've got LeBaron Philon, who's been leading the way with over 20 points per contest going into yesterday, shooting 38% from 3-point range. But then you've got Taylor Boulbown at 6'10", who's able to shoot 37.5% from 3, give you some rebounding. You've got Latrell Wrightsell, who's been a little bit in and out of the lineup, but he's a guy that has a career high 33-point shooter. You've got the same for a guy like a Houston Mallett as well. And then you get back Kenton Bristow, who he missed the first 3 games of the season, but at 6'10", he's going to give a post presence that I think UNLV is going to have a tough time matching up with. I do think that for Alabama, they do a nice job of taking it to a UNLV team that's all sorts of banged up, and I do think that with this being a back-to-back, it does cause for these teams to slow down just a half a hair. As UNLV, they themselves have been a top 75 team in terms of total possessions per game, so set a total of 175. I'm in on the under of the Alabama, set them as 15-point favorite. We'll delay the number 679, 680 on the card. Tulsa and San Jose State do battle from the great state of California from Acusure Arena, and Tulsa's a 5.5 to a 6.5-point favorite. Totals between 151 to 151.5. Maybe on line 3, I'm going to be willing to take a shot here on San Jose State. For San Jose State, it is a team that's in quite a bit of transition, and when San Jose State has really had their success, it's been mainly because they've had good rebounding, and now you've got Yafat Mundi, who comes on over from Iona. He's been able to give the team about 11 points, 10 boards per contest, and Kobe Carlin, who comes over from the Big South, he's been able to supply the team with 21 points, 4.5 assists per game for a team that's currently shooting 37% from 3. Now, it is a defense that is leaving something to be desired. They're outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they've been a top 175 team in terms of their offensive rebound percentage, and the Tulsa metrics might not necessarily be like completely amazing or anything like that, but that's that Tulsa's very much improved from what they were a season ago. As that offense now has some punch. You're bringing 2 transfers I really like. David Green, nice double-figure scorer that dropped 40% for 3 last year at Rhode Island, currently shooting only 26% for 3, should be going northward, but at 6'7", he pulled in their 5.5 rebounds per game last year, doing the same for the Tulsa team. And then Miles Barnstable, he was over at St. Thomas last year, year, top scorer for one of the most efficient offenses in all of college basketball. 15 points, 5.5 boards, 3.5 assists, shooting 39% from three-point range. Love what he's able to bring to the table. This is a Tulsa team that's not going to force the issue. They're well outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. So San Jose State, who's been a little bit sloppy with the ball, they're going to be able to take care of that. Now Tulsa should be able to win the battle down low. You don't necessarily have one guy that's giving you over 5.5 or so rebounds per game, but the whole is greater than the sum of his parts. Ian Michael has been able to give you 5 boards per game, like what he's able to bring to the table. Roma Dean, he comes over from Fordham. He's able to give you like 5 rebounds per game. Miles Rigsby is a nice do-it-all sort of guy who's been dealing with a little bit of injury to begin the season, began his career over at Troy, and he's come in, and in the 2 games that he's actually played, most recently he played against Austin Peay, should be all good to go in this one. But last year, you go back to what he did at Troy, 12 points, 4 boards, steal and a half per contest, just gives you some rough and tumble on defense, and I do think that this is going to be a little bit more of a defense-oriented game. It's a Tulsa team that I think that they're going to be looking to play with a little bit of pace, but I don't think that they're necessarily going to be a team that guns it. And San Jose State, traditionally under Tim Miles, has been a team that's been a little bit slower tempo. Not necessarily like super-duper slow it down, but I mean, right now they're checking in 305th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, so I do think they get a little bit of slugs. Tulsa's about 218th in terms of total possessions per game, so set a line of 3. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Old St. Josie State, semi-total 147, so I'm also in on the under. 681, 682 on the card. You've got Loyola Chicago. They're going to be playing against Northern Iowa. Northern Iowa, 8.5 to 9.5 point favorites, so I'll scoop between 134.5 to a 135, and I set Northern Iowa as a 9.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 9 here with them. For Loyola Chicago, they lose by double figures to Northern Illinois. Like, good grief. This has just gotten really bad for them, and for Loyola Chicago, where they've really went wrong is that they never grab offensive rebounds themselves. They're a one-and-done team, but they prevent other teams from being able to grab those second chances. Right now, they are about 335th in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage. 37.9% of opponents' missed shots are resulting in an offensive rebound. Now, you've got a Northern Iowa team that's outside the top 345 in terms of offensive rebound percentage, but they should be able to find some success here. You don't necessarily have a ton of size, but Will Hornseth, he stands right around 6'8", 10 points, 4 boards. You've got a lot of versatility with this team. Max Weisbrod, who comes over from the D2 ranks, he's been able to give you 5 points, a little bit of facilitation with 2.5 assists per game, and then you've got a good backcourt with Trey Campbell. He's back from a season ago. He's been able to give this team 14.5 points, shooting in the mid-30s from 3. Northern Iowa last year actually shot a little bit better than their current 35.8% 3-point shooting, so a little bit of positivity we had there. Ben Schwiegert's coming off the bench. He's been able to give you about 9.5 points per game. It's really been a whole greater than some of its parts approach with regards to the offense, and for Loyola Chicago, this just looks like a broken team right now. I wish I could put it any other way, and they should be doing for a little bit of positivity with an offense that's currently outside the top 200 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but on top of that, with their defense going just so far down the toilet bowl, they're not generating any turnovers. They're outside the top 325 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They're getting absolutely cooked with regards to the 3-point line. They're allowing opponents to shoot 41.5% from 3. They've actually been respectable down low with Miles Rubin giving you 3 blocks, 6 boards, 12.5 points per contest, but you just need these guys to be able to get online. Joseph Joseph has been a nice scorer over at Minnesota and California. He's right now giving you 6.5 points, shooting 37.5% from 3, and the 3-point shooting is actually not bad. They're shooting 34.5% from 3 with, so many of these guys like DeWitt Tavares, Cade Dodson, Chuck Love. They've all been shooting between 34 and 35% from 3, and Justin Moore, 37.5% from 3, 5 assists, the 3 turnovers, needs to clean those up, but it's not like they're turning the ball over a ton at 11.5 turnovers per game. It's just completely broken with doing the little things, and I think that's where Northern Iowa eats them up. Set my line at 9.5, willing to lay with Northern Iowa, set a total of 141.5, so I'm also in on the over. 683, 684 on the card. You've got NC State and Boise State doing battle from the Maui Invitational. No numbers up on this game, but I've got my handicap. I said NC State as a 5-point favorite. We're going to lay up to 4.5 with them. 5.5 or more. Going to be taking the points with Boise State, and then a 146.5 or less, and on the over 147.5 or higher, the under. One thing Boise State does a really good job of is being able to the defensive glass, as they've been a top 10 team in all of college basketball the last 2 years in terms of defensive rebound percentage, not allowing second and third chances for Boise State. Obviously, they took that bad loss against Hawaii Pacific. They've been able to get online ever since then, and they do have a guy in Andrew Meadow who's been able to shoot over 40% from 3-point range. I like the fact that he's been able to supply the seam with over 14 points per contest, and then additionally, it's been a backcourt that has been in a little bit of transition, but it does feel like they're finding their footing with Dylan Andrews, who was a 12-point per game scorer 2 seasons ago over at UCLA, being able to give you some good production. They did a nice job holding in there against USC yesterday, as it feels like they're getting back to their defensive roots. As for Boise State, it felt like they were going a little bit too fast for their own good to begin the season, because this is a team that should be built down low, as you've got someone like a Drew Drew Fielder, who didn't have a great game yesterday, but he's been supplying the team with about 11 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. Javon Buchanan, he's back from a season ago. He's been able to give this team a double-figure amount of points. He's throwing in there 5 boards, a little bit of facilitation as well. And then Pearson Carmichael, I think, is a little bit of an upside guy as well. And then for NC State, it is a bunch that had a rough loss against Seton Hall, and it's going to take a little bit of time for these guys to be able to get really acclimated with one another, but obviously a rock-solid roster. You've got a guy in Darian Williams who's able to give you 20-plus points per contest. Paul McNeil has really been a nice surprise, given they've seen 15 points per game. They entered into yesterday shooting over 43% from three-point range, and it was expected that you get a little bit of regression there. And if you look at Will Wade and the way that he coached over at McNeese last season, that was actually a team that was well outside the top 275 in terms of total possessions per game. Obviously, when you bring in the pieces that you do, they've been going a little bit more up-tempo, but I do think that this team is going to be reliant upon generating turnovers, and Boise State is starting to clean up their act a little bit there, but I do think that Trey Holloman, who comes over from Michigan State, has been a double-figure scorer. Is going to be able to do a nice job helping out with regards to facilitation, as that's been mostly Kadir Copeland, who comes on over with Will Wade as a 6'6", a little bit of a point forward. He was able to have 6 assists. Yesterday, he's been averaging about 4.5 assists per contest thus far this season. Then you've got some nice depth pieces. Terrence Arsenault needs to pick it up a little bit, did not score at all yesterday, and he spent some time over at Houston. So circumstance where 4.5 or less won away with NC State, and then 5.5 or more on Boise State, and then set a total of a 146.5 or less to the over 147 or higher, the under 685, 686. You've got Seton Hall going up against USC. So USC is a 9.5 point favorite. I'm going to be one way up to 9 with them, 10 or more, taking the points with Seton Hall, and then made my total a 145.5. So 145 or less in on the over, 146 or higher, the under. This is a Seton Hall group that is never really going to be looking to run it and gun it. They're always going to be defense oriented, and Sheehan Hallway doing a great job getting the most out of his team to be able to get the job done yesterday against NC State, and more of a, shall we say, score and up-tempo game, as Seton Hall entered into yesterday just 361st in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and this is going to be a unique tempo style. You've got USC team that's in the top 25 in terms of total possessions per game. Seton Hall is very low and slow, but for Seton Hall, TJ Simpkins along with AJ Sam McRae, they've really been able to shine for this team. They're right now combining for about 24 to 25 points per contest. You've got Elijah Fisher, who's a little bit of a do-it-all guy, began his career over at Texas Second DePaul. Last year at Pacific was really able to get some minutes, 15.5 points, 5 boards. He was able to do a bit of everything over there. It's never been a great three-point shooter, and the Seton Hall team, they're not going to be an amazing three-point shooting team. They went yesterday 7 to 22 from 3. That's about what you can expect, but you've got some like a Tawan Simpkins, who's been able to do a nice job in terms of being able to ascend. Jaleel Hines has been able to do a nice job there, and Adam Clark, he's just a very tough-nosed guy, comes over from Merrimack, where he was generating a bunch of steals there, and this is a Seton Hall team that I think when it's all said and done, going to be good at generating turnovers, but now you run into a USC backcourt that they're just so veteran, and I do think that that's going to allow them to be able to keep things relatively clean. Chad Baker-Mazaro has been in college basketball since I was in diapers. He's been able to give you over 22 points per contest. You've got a USC team that they themselves have been very rock solid in terms of being able to protect things down low. Top 10 team with regards to shot block percentage, as Chad Baker-Mazaro is giving you 2 blocks per game. Jacob Kofi, 2.5 blocks per contest. Gabe Dines, over 7 feet tall, over 2 blocks per game, and this is a Seton Hall team that, with them looking to go a little bit more down low, that should really allow this USC team to be able to take hold. And then you've got Rodney Rice, who's giving you over 21 points per game, coming over from Maryland, and he's been able to give that team over 7 assists per game, while this USC team doing a great job taking care of the ball. So I do think that it's going to be a case where USC might get slowed down a little bit, but I think they're efficient enough to win this game comfortably. 9 or less, 1 away with USC, 10 or more taking the points with Seton Hall, and then 145 or less, and on the over 146 or higher, the under 687, 688 on the card. It's going to be Washington State, and they're going to be taking on the winner of the current Texas versus Arizona State game. I have to have this up by midnight Pacific, so right now recording this at 10 o'clock p.m. Pacific time, looking like it should be Texas, and if you do indeed get Texas, willing to lay up to 9 with Texas 10 or more, taking the points with Washington State, and then set a total to where 153 or less, in on the over, 154 or higher, the under. Now if it's Arizona State, total would remain relatively the same. I'd say Arizona State is probably closer to like a 5.5 point favorite, somewhere in that neighborhood. But with regards to this Washington State team, they got a big giant scare against Chaminade. I think that they're better than what they showed in that first half against Chaminade, where they had like 15 turnovers. That was just all sorts of awful. But that said, this is still a Washington State team that is very clear that they're a little bit of a work in progress, but they were able to get some really nice production. 25 points off the bench out of Rahir Varvers, who I think has a little bit of upside. The starters for Washington State were just absolutely awful in this game. You got Thomas Radson, who I think is going to be all bounce back. He's been able to give you 10 points, 5 boards per contest, 6'6", a little bit of a do-it-all guy, and it's a case where Jerome Morton is not giving the team a lot of scoring coming over from Wright State, but has been able to give out right around about 2.5, 3 assists per contest, and it is a Washington State team that prior to what we saw on Monday, they were protecting the ball a little bit better, leaving something to be desired with regards to glass, and they were able to clean that up with Emil Yuho, giving the team 9 rebounds yesterday. And if you do indeed get Texas in this game, it's a case where it's a backcourt that is very veteran, but they're really underachieving this year. Going into that game against Arizona State, you got Draymond Mark and Jordan Pope giving you less than 10 points per contest and both shooting below 30% from 3. We should see some positivity there. Mateus Volkatis, he's been coming over from Florida Atlantic, and he's really been the star for this team. Going into yesterday, 16.7 boards, and your main backcourt piece has been Dalen Swain. He comes on over with Mr. Sean Miller from Xavier. He's done a nice job supplying the team with 15 points, 6.5 boards, 2.5 assists. Again, not shooting it well from 3. I think that there's going to be a little bit of positivity to be had there, and this is a Washington State team that, again, they looked really sloppy with regards to the backcourt yesterday, and for this Washington State team, they're a team that is prone to giving up a lot of good looks from three-point range. They entered into yesterday with opponents shooting 39.5% for 3, which we should see a little bit of positivity there, but do think that Texas should be able to find some good looks from 3 if it is indeed Texas against Washington State. I set that to where I'd be willing to lay up to 9 with Texas, center more. Take the points with Washington State, 153 or less. I'm going to be in on the over, 154 or higher, the under. And if you do get Arizona State, relatively similar total, and Arizona State would be closer to a 5 to a 5.5 point favorite. And if things do hold the form, you're going to get Chaminade versus Arizona State, 689, 690 on the card. I did set Arizona State as a 24.5 point favorite. Would be willing to lay up to 24 with them, 25 or more. Taking the points with Chaminade, set a total of 152.5. So 152 or less in on the over, 153 or higher, the under. And for Arizona State, this is a team that I think when it's all said and done, they're going to be a middle of the road team with regards to their tempo going into yesterday, about 150th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and they have found another star freshman down low, Masamba Diop, going into yesterday, doing a really good job getting the team 6 boards, 13.5 points, not necessarily like a supreme shot blocker or anything like that, but a block and a half and a steal and a half per game, so he does a great job on the defensive side of things. You bring in Marcus Adams, who I really liked over at CSUN, has been a little bit silent to begin the season, but they gave him a nice dose of minutes yesterday, and Mo Odom has been really doing a good job throwing it out. He spent some time over at Pacific at Pepperdine, and Pepperdine last year, 7.5 assists per game. He's doing the same here for Arizona State. He's really been able to clean up that offense, and for Arizona State, even though the three-point shooting isn't as good as it was a season ago, you do have someone like a Bryce Bill Ford Tough who comes over from Toledo, who's been able to give you a double-figure amount of points, so they're really looking to that mid-major pipeline. And then for the Chaminade team, they forced Washington State into 15 turnovers in the game yesterday, and this is very much an up-and-down team. If you look at them at the D2 ranks, they do have a few guys that have a little bit of Division I experience. If I'm not mistaken, you've got someone like a Fletcher McDonald, I think was at the Division I level. Their guy yesterday that was really able to come through was Ken King, and you've got a lot of guys that were over at Vincennes. That's a very good JUCO school for just overall the landscape of college basketball. With King, he was able to give you about 10 rebounds in the game yesterday, and Chaminade, they're going to be a little bit outgunned down low. They don't necessarily have ideal size, so D up if you do indeed have Arizona State, and the big men of Texas, if you get them, they should be able to take it out of them. And if it is Texas, I'd probably be setting that total closer to about a 154 or less to the over, 155 or higher to the under. And I'd set Texas as more around about a 27-point favorite, but if it is indeed Arizona State versus Chaminade, 24 or less looking to lay with Arizona State, 25 or more Chaminade, and then 152 or less in on the over, 153 or higher the under. 691, 692 on the card. This is a game without numbers. You've got Ohio and Loyola Maryland. They're going to be doing battle out there from Ocean Center. With this one, I did set Loyola Marymount as a 3.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 3 with Loyola, 4 more, take the points with Ohio, and then set a total of 149 or less, and on the over 150 or higher, the under 149.5. That's what I set the total at. But that said, with this Loyola Marymount team, they've been playing relatively controlled style, not necessarily super duper fast, not necessarily super duper slow. They got at a little bit by Florida Atlantic yesterday, as this team was a line team to shoot only 28.5% from 3. You knew that there was going to be a little bit of regression there, but still doing a nice job on the glass. They've been a top 75 team with regards to rebound percentage. You don't necessarily have one guy that has been super duper good on the glass. You've got 2 rock solid players, though, in Eric McBride along with Jalen Shelley, who have been able to combine for about 15 or so rebounds per game. McBride is someone that has been in the program for the last few years, but this team is really built around MJ Hamey, the transfer from San Jose State, who's in year number 2 of the system. He's been able to supply over 15 points per contest for him. a Loyola Marymount team that has been solid at generating turnovers. They're a top 175 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. And with this Ohio team, they're running relatively clean offense, but the defense has been once again atrocious. Last year, they were outside the top 320 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and they're getting absolutely cooked from distance once again this season as they got just absolutely destroyed against George Mason yesterday. And for this Ohio team, you've got relatively good guard play. You've got Jackson Pavleski, who's back from season ago. He's been able to get this team 14-plus points per contest. Had a little bit of a bad showing yesterday, but you're bringing Dior Connors, a 40% three-point shooter last year over at Appalachian State. This team just has nothing on the boards. You've got Jalen Breth, who's out with a little bit of injury right now, supplying the team with about 4 rebounds per game. Last season over at UNC Greensboro, he was able to give that team more like 6 rebounds per game, but not a lot of size, so that means that they could be had on the inside. Aiden Hadaway, he's been able to do a nice job. He at 6'8", supplies the team with about 14 points, 7 rebounds per game, so he's been relatively solid there. And Ohio, a good, not great three-point shooting, but good. But with this Ohio team, they've been looking to play a little bit more mid-tempo this season. It's a Loyola Marymount team that, again, I don't think that they're going to be super-duper slow. Right now, they're about 258th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. I think that that's where they land, but they go up against an Ohio team that's really not guarding. So 3 or less willing to lay it with Loyola Marymount, 4 or more taking the points with Ohio, and then 149 or less, and on the over 150 or higher, the under 693, 694, also out there from Ocean Center. You got George Mason going against Florida Atlantic. I set a line of 2.5 with George Mason being the favorite, willing to lay up to 2 with them, 3 or more, taking the points with Florida Atlantic, and then set a total of 145.5. So 145 or less in on the over, 146 or higher, the under with Florida Atlantic. Did a nice job yesterday taking it to a pretty solid Loyola Marymount team, but you just don't know what you're going to get out of this team night in, night out. And Florida Atlantic is once again having massive issues being able to guard the three-point line. They were outside the top 300 in terms of three-point shooting percentage defense last season. Looks like they're going to be back there once again this season, and now you go up against a squad that can do a relatively solid job of being able to light you up from three-point range in George Mason. Not necessarily a team that has like a whole bunch of shooters or anything like that, but I do like what you've been able to get out of someone like a Corey Mincy, who comes over from Presbyterian. He's been able to give you 15-plus points per contest, and he over at Presbyterian was a high 30s three-point shooter. This is George Mason team that's very much built around defense. Last year, that George Mason team was number 10 in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They entered a Monday number 12 with that regard, and they should be right back right around there after the expose that they put on yesterday, holding Ohio to fewer than 70 points. And for George Mason, you've been able to get a lot out of Jahari Long, who he has a 6'5" do-it-all player, has given you about 13 points, 4 boards, began his career over at Seton Hall in Maryland, and he's been able to pop it relatively well from three-point range, and the rough and tumble of this team is nice. Riley Allenpatch, he's able to give you 6 rebounds per game. Dola Edbayo comes over from Mount St. Mary's. He's been able to give you 5 boards per contest, and Allenpatch is able to shoot it from 3 at 6'11" as well. You've got a George Mason team that also now has Masai Troutman coming off the bench. He has overall been able to give you about 12 points per contest. When he's been fully healthy, he's been one of the better shooters in all of college basketball, so that's big. Nick Ellington is able to control the boards as well, and for Florida Atlantic, that's just going to be hard for them to be able to match up with. As for Florida Atlantic, you do have a guy in Cannon Carlisle who he's able to be a double-figure scorer. Had a really nice run over at Samford a few seasons ago, but this is a guy that could be very hit or miss with regards to that offense. He had 24 points yesterday, and who knows what he's going to be able to give you today, as you've got Devin Vanterpool has really been the main constant. At 6'4", he's able to give you about 16 points, 6 boards, 3 assists, a little bit of a do-it-all guy that's in year number 2 of the system, and you've got a few international men of mystery that have been pretty solid, as Yohan Sissoko was relatively limited in terms of his production yesterday, but that said, you've got some like Xander Pendleton, who's been able to give you about 9 points per game. He comes over from Belgium at 6'11", is able to space the floor a little bit, shooting over 40% from 3. So very interesting circumstance. I do think that George Mason going to get this game slowed down. They're outside the top 225 in terms of total possessions per game. Florida Atlantic, when they're really humming, they're able to get into the top 75 in terms of total possessions per game. So 145 or less in on the over, 146 or higher the under. One to lay up to a deuce with George Mason. 3 or more taking those points with Florida Atlantic. 695, 696 on the card. This is Iowa taking on Mississippi. This is from the city of Palm Springs, California, and Iowa is a 2.5-point favorite total on this game, between 146.5 to a 147.5. Made my total a 145.5. I'm in on the under. Iowa is still well outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game. Ben McCollum's team has not played fast. They've just been efficient. Top 10 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They're only turned the ball over 10 times per contest. They're shooting 40% from 3. They're shooting 70% on their twos as well. As Bennett starts, he's been amazing. 17.5 points, 6 assists, steal and a half per contest. You bring in from Robert Morris, Alvaro Fogurius. He was, as a 6'9" combo player, shooting darn near 40% last season. Right now, shooting over 50% from three. We'll see a little bit of regression there, but do-it-all guy with 12 points, 6 boards, 3 assists, and this is an Iowa team that's really getting after it in terms of generating turnovers. They've been a top 75 unit in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis and turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and this is an Ole Miss team that had a little bit of a struggle against Austin Peay over the weekend, and I remember Chris Beard brought up the starters. He said, these are the guys that knocked off Austin Peay by a single-digit amount of points, so he's trying to fire up his team. AJ Storr, we've seen the good and the bad with him. He's right now averaging 14.5 points per game, has never really been the most efficient scorer. Right now shooting 60% from three. That'll certainly be going downward, but Malik D at 6'9", good versatility, 14 points, 5.5 boards. Love what he's able to bring to the table. You've got James Scott, who comes on over from Louisville along with College of Charleston. He's been able to do a nice job being able to supply about 7 rebounds per game. Not a guy that's going to light you up from three, and he's pretty much the only guy on the floor that's not going to be able to, as the international man of mystery, Elias Carmindi, hopefully I said that correct, comes over from France. He's been supplying the team with 16 points, shooting over 40% from three. We know that Chris Beard teams, they love versatility, and they love just taking care of the ball. Back in the top 25, in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, this is an Ole Miss team that I think is going to be, when it's all said and done, a relatively controlled team as well. This is not necessarily going to be a team that's super duper slow, but I mean, they're about 250th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, so I do think that both of these teams are going to be efficient, but that sets at a total of 145.5. I like the under. I did set Ole Miss as a very slight 1.5 point favorite. I like the way that this team is built. I do think that the overall size is going to take it out of this Iowa team a little bit, so like Ole Miss on the money line and the total under. This is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra games. 697, 698. You've got Grand Canyon. They're playing against Utah. Utah is a 3.5 to a 4.5 point underdog at the Huntsman Center, and total on this game is 159.5. Out there in the great state of Utah, I made Utah the 1.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take a shot on them outright on the money line. Terrence Brown is right now number 2 in the country in terms of scoring. He's been able to give the team 25.2 points per contest, has bailed them out of just only having the one loss. They would have a whole heck of a lot more if it weren't for him. He certainly bailed them out in that game against Fort Wayne. He bailed them out big time against Weber State. He has been tremendous, and you do have one rock solid rebounder in Keno Dallas, who's been able to give you 11 boards per contest. And to the credit of James Okonkwo, 6.5 rebounds per game. He's right now getting 4 times more rebounds than he is points, so that's been interesting to say the least, but it's a Utah team that does rank in the top 85 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and Grand Canyon is usually a relatively rock-solid defense. Currently, they're 141st in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They gave up a 90 spot at home to Youngstown State. You've got Dusty Stromer, who's a relatively solid three-point shooter, a former top 75 recruit, but he's been pedestrian with about 7.5 points per game. Willem Breitenbach, who comes over from Washington, he's only been able to give you 3.5 rebounds per game. Now, Nana Wusu Nane has been able to do a little bit of everything. Comes over from Brown, love his game, 12 points, 11 boards, 3.5 assists, a steal, a block per contest. He's able to pop it from three as well, but this isn't necessarily the world's greatest three-point shooting team either. They're shooting about 32.5% from three. I like the game of Brian Moore Jr. comes around over from Norfolk State, where last year he gave that team 18 points at 39.5% three-point shooting, but for Grand Canyon, the 13.5 turnovers per game have been a little bit unsightly. They themselves have taken a step back in terms of generating turnovers from a season ago. They've been outside the top 100 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They're doing a great job on the glass. Grand Canyon right now a top 25 rebound rate team, but they're allowing teams to shoot over 35% from three. They've taken a step back with regards to that perimeter play. I think that allows Utah to be able to win out in what I think is going to be a little bit more of a defensive game. I think that Bryce Drew is going to get his team to play a little bit better on the defensive side of things, and I would not be surprised if Grand Canyon slows themselves down a little bit, as it just feels like they've got a team in general that they are playing a little bit too fast for their own good right now. They're about 170th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Utah is looking to gun it under Alex Jensen right now in terms of total possessions per game, about 56th, but I think that both of these teams scale back a little bit in on the underside by total 155.5, and like Utah on the money line, now we hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-539, 306-540, game without numbers, as we've got East Texas A&M and Army. This is going to be a neutral court game out there from the northeast part of the country, and I said East Texas A&M as a 1.5 point favorite. Willing to lay up to 1 with them, 2 or more taking the points with Army. Set a total of a 143.5, 143 or less, in on the over, 144 or higher the under. This is off the board because East Texas A&M played yesterday. They came back from down 18 points against Fairleigh Dickinson. If you like me at Fairleigh Dickinson, that one one was brutal. But that said, with this Army team, there's really not a lot that they're doing well. They're outside the top 225 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. They're getting absolutely killed on the glass. They have really no sense of facilitation whatsoever. Ryan Curry has been the lone guy that's been able to give you much of anything whatsoever. He's like the only other top 5 scorers that's a holdover. 11.5 points, 4.5 boards, 4 assists. So he's been trying to do a little bit of everything. You do have Jason Holloway, Jackson Furman, both giving you about 11.5 points per game, but this team is shooting less than 25% from 3. They're turning the ball over 13 times per game. They're getting less than a block per game down low. Like, this team is getting dump truck down low. They've got one guy, Tate Lakowski, who's been able to give you over 5 rebounds per game, and for East Texas A&M. Typically, this is a team that very much struggles on the glass, but in this matchup, they might be a little bit better than that with Michael Florian, who comes down over from St. Bonaventure, giving you 5.5 rebounds per game. Ronnie Harrison, he was very rock solid in the small sample size of 8 games that he played at Charleston State last season. Last season, for that bunch, he gave them 10.5 points, able to generate a steal and a half per contest, and East Texas A&M typically does one thing well, and that is generate turnovers. They were last year a top 75 team in terms of turnovers for us on a per possession basis, and reason to believe they should be a little bit better down low. Josh Taylor, when he was over at East Tennessee State a few seasons ago, was a 5+ rebound per game guy. You're bringing Tate Mosher, who he began his career over at East Carolina along with Bryant. He should be able to give you a little bit as a 6'7" do-it-all sort of player, and I do think that for Army, it's just an uphill battle for them in general, and East Texas A&M is not a team that I'm impressed with. They're turning the ball over 13.5 times per game, and I don't think that they duplicate the over 40% three-point shooting that they had yesterday, so I set this line at 1.5, willing to lay up to 1 with East Texas A&M, 2 or more taking the points with Army, 143 or less in on the over, 144 or higher the under. Another game that's off the board, 306-541, 306-542. This is Middle Tennessee, and they're going to be playing against McNeese. This is going to be a neutral court game, I believe, in this great state of Florida. This is off the board because this is game number 3 in 3 days for both of these teams, but I set Middle Tennessee as a underdog of 7.5 points. So 7 or less, I'm going to be willing to lay it with McNeese. 8 or more, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Middle Tennessee, and I set a total of a 149.5. So 149 or less in on the over, 150 or higher the under with McNeese. Last year, they were a very slow and controlled team. They were outside the top 275 in terms of total possessions per game. Seems like they might be willing to speed themselves up a little bit more this year. They're about 224th right now in terms of total possessions per game, but his team is just flat out efficient, and you bring back some of those pieces from a season ago as well. Like you bring back Javon Garcia, who was able to give this team double figures. You were able to have DJ Turn It Up Richard shoot about 40% from 3-point range, and it led to them being able to hold down Murray State to just 60 points yesterday. A Murray State team that has not been slowed down by darn near anyone this season. They forced them into 20 turnovers. McNeese last year was a top 35 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and they've got buy-in from this entire roster, including Gawari Duels, a former top 50 recruit that's right now playing a 6-man role. He's been able to do a bit of everything, as he's giving you like 9.5 points, 6 assists. He's been able to throw in there a steal and a block per contest as well. And then Jarrell Colbert, who's been all around. He's a 6'10" big man over at SMU, Kansas State. List goes on and on. He's been able to give you some good rebounding as well. And for Middle Tennessee, they're going to have a tough time matching up down low. But that said, you do have Kamari Lands, who's been in college basketball for seemingly 500 years, doing a nice job giving the team 14.5 points per contest. You've had a 6'9" do-it-all player in Torrey Olson, doing a nice job in terms of giving the team 8 boards per contest. As for this Middle Tennessee team, they've actually been really good in terms of generating second and third chances off the glass as well. For Middle Tennessee, typically their hallmark is generating turnovers, and they've still been solid in terms of being able to generate a few, but they've taken a little bit of step back with that this season. Sean Smith, he's a guy that has been able to come in from Western Illinois, where last year he gave the team 10.5 points. He was generating about a steal and a half per contest, and he's been able to give the team a little bit of life with regards to their three-point shooting. In Middle Tennessee, it's very clear that they're looking to bomb it from three-point range. As of right now, I believe that they have taken more threes than they have two-point shots, so that's going to be interesting to see how that develops moving forward. You've got Alec Oglesby, who's been around the block. I remember a few years ago was very rock solid over at UNC Wilmington, spent some time over at Stetson. He's a career about 39.5% three-point shooter, but for Middle Tennessee, I do think that they slow down from the current pace of being in the top 100 with regards to total possessions per game, and with this being the game number 3 in 3 days, I do think that these guys are going to be a little bit worn out, so I'm going to be one lay up to 7 with McNeese, 8 or more taking the points with Middle Tennessee, 149 or less, and on the over 150 or higher, the under 306-543, 306-544. It is Drexel, and they're on the road. They're facing off against Morgan State. Morgan State, a 7.5 point home underdog. So on this game, it is 149.5, and I did set Drexel here as a favorite of 6 points. So I'm going to be one take shot on Morgan State. Morgan State, traditionally a very up-tempo team that, well, they're typically outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Reason to believe with the 7-footer Christian Oliver back for another year that they're going to be a little bit better down low with this Morgan State team. Right now, they've been a little bit more controlled, about 216th in the country country. In terms of total possessions per game, Drexel is back to playing very slow and very controlled, 287th in the country. In terms of total possessions per game, it is a Drexel team that's in the top 100 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and on offense they're right now leaving something to be desired. You've got Shane Blakeney back from a season ago, 12.5 points, 5 boards, a little bit over 2 assists per contest for a Drexel team that's shooting about 34.5% for 3. Not bad considering they lose Kobe McGee from a season ago, but you're looking at someone like a Victor Panov, who's back from season ago, giving you some production, about 7.5 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. Hole's been greater than some of its parts with regards to rebounding for the team as well. As right now, you've got 6 different guys that are giving you at least 4 rebounds per game. Only one guy giving you over 5.1 rebounds per game. That'd be Willem Garcia Adston. He comes over from overseas, so he's been a nice little add for the team. But again, with this Drexel team, it's just been hard for them to be able to flow good, clean offense or turn the ball over 12.5 times per contest, which with their tempo, that's not necessarily too great. And on the other side of things, you do have a Morgan State team that has always had a tough time in terms of taking care of the ball. The 12.5 turnovers per game is a big improvement for them as they bring back Rob Lawson from the season ago. 4.5 assists, 13 points per contest. The team is only shooting 30% for 3. Reason to believe it should be a little bit better with having Walter Pigs come back from being at Tennessee Tech a few seasons ago. He's out with a little bit of injury, was down at the non-D1 ranks, but has always been a career 40+% three-point shooter. Alfred Worrell was a really nice scorer over at Southern Miss last season, was a nice 6th man for that team. He's been able to supply about 12.5 points per game, and I do think that Elijah Davis, who's been all around the block, could be a little bit of an X factor as well. This is a man that last year over at Incarnate Word was a part-time starter. He's a guy that doesn't really light you up from three-point range at 6'1", but does a nice job being able to dish it out. He, over at Incarnate Word last year, gave out 3+ assists per contest. This year, he's given the team 4.5 assists per game, so like his overall game. And I do think that Morgan State holds in there against a Drexel team that is going to look to slow it down. Morgan State certainly has their warts with regards to their defense, and I think that this is close enough for late game following. So set a total of 150 here at 149.5, like the over, but somehow line at 6 going to be willing to take those points with Morgan State. 306-545, 306-546. It is UNC Asheville, and they're going to be playing us at Tennessee State. Tennessee State is a 6.5 point underdog. 154 to 154.5 is the total line with Tennessee State. I did set them as an underdog 3.5 points, so I am going to be willing to take those points with UNC Asheville. Just a unit that doesn't quite have the same guard play that they've had in past seasons. I do like Toya Solomon coming back. Last season, he gave the team 15.7 boards per contest, and he's done a rock-solid job this season. I've given you pretty much the same sort of performance. They brought in Justin Wright along Cameron Taylor to really be able to elevate this team. Taylor's a holdover from a season ago where he was solid for the team. Not a great three-point shooter. It's a 6'7", a little bit of a wing, but he's been able to give the team 16 points, 5 boards, 3 assists, and then you've got Justin Wright, who has been Mr. Wright. Began his career over at NC Central and was pretty solid over at Loyola Marymount as well. Like 2 years ago at Loyola Marymount, 11 points. Didn't necessarily shoot it well from 3, but his career 39% three-point shooter was just out with injury all season long last season, and he's been able to return. He's been able to give the team 18 points per contest. And Connor Dubusky, who he's a holdover from a season ago with seal with injury to begin the season, being able to get him back into the fold in that game against a non-D1 school, that's going to be big for them as well. And then for the Tennessee State squad, they are built around being able to rebound. They were a top 75 team in terms of rebound percentage last season. Right now, they're grabbing 15 offensive rebounds per game, with Aaron Nakumra being able to lead the way. 18.5 points, 2.5 steals, 5.5 rebounds per game. It is a Tennessee State team that still very much leaves something to be desired in terms of ball control. Last year, they were outside the top 320 in terms of turnovers per possession on offense. Right now, they're turning the ball over 16.5 times per game, but they're holding up defensively, allowing teams to shoot less than 30% from three-point range. They're doing a great job winning that rebound battle with just once again, holds greater than some of his first approach. You do have Jalen Petrie being able to give you about 7 rebounds per game. At 6'8", he comes in from Sacramento State and Pepperdine, but you've also been able to have a guy in Travis Harper who was really able to spark the offense last year, give you 16.5 points, 6.5 boards, 3 assists. So I do like the overall versatility. Carlos Williams down low comes over from Tulsa. Last year, he gave the team 5+ rebounds per game. It's been a little bit more pedestrian this season, but I do think that the overall rebounding of Tennessee State keeps them in it. This is a Tennessee State team that is not shy to run. Last year, they were in the top 35 in terms of total possessions per game. Right now, Tennessee State clocking in number 10 in the country. I do think that comes down just a little bit. So I did set a total here of a 161.5. I'm going to be in on the over. I think that you get enough possessions for it. UNC Asheville doesn't really generate a lot of turnovers, and I'm going to be willing to take those points with Tennessee State. 306-547, 306-548. NC Central is on the road against USC Upstate. Upstate is a 6.5 point favorite. 152 to 152.5 is the total, and Set a total of 156.5. I like the over for NC Central. This is traditionally not a team that's going to be playing super duper up tempo. Well, USC Upstate last year, they were looking to gun it. This year, it feels like they're going to be taking quite a bit of step back with regards to that overall tempo. Right now, for USC Upstate, in terms of total possessions per game, they're checking in about 209th in all of college basketball, but they should be able to really blast this NC Central team down low. Down low last year, NC Central was outside the top 345 in terms of opponent's 2-point shooting percentage. Big for an Upstate team that only shoots about 32.5% from 3 pointers. They are built a little bit more around the backcourt. Kamani Gregory and Carmelo Atkins are back from season ago. They're right now combining for about 30 points per game, and Atkins is shooting 50% from 3. That should be coming downward, but you do have a USC Upstate team that really doesn't have anyone that's giving you over 5 rebounds per game. Atkins has been leading the way. Lyric Davis is someone that began his career over at Tennessee State, former top 250 recruit of the state of Wisconsin. 9.5 points, 4.5 boards, a steal, a block per game, so he's been able to lend some good versatility there. Upstate still having their issues with regards to just really being able to guard down low themselves. They've been outside the top 150 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, much more respectable on glass than they were a season ago, and that should be enough against an NC Central team that just over the last few seasons, they haven't had a ton down low. This is an NC Central team that, to their credit, they've been a top 225 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage, outside the top 300 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, but this is a squad that last year was a top 35 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Upstate has been able to clean up their act. They're now only turned the ball over about 12 times per game, but I do think that for NC Central, they're going to be a little bit better down low with bringing in Jonathan Dunn from Coppin St. He last year for that squad gave you about 5 rebounds per game, only about 2.5 rebounds per game. Your main rebounder has been Corey Carvey. He's come in, he's been able to give the team 14.5 points, 7 boards, and actually shooting over 40% from 3. And Gage Lattimore, well, he's been gauging a 51.9% 3-point shooting expose this season. He's been very good with about 20.5 points per contest. Has come in as a non-D1 transfer and has really been able to light this thing up. And for Kyrick Davis, last year 10-point per game score over at West Georgia, only give the team about 5.5 points per game, as you've got Carvey and Lattimore really leading the way, and nobody outside of them is giving you more than 6.5 points per game. So you've got 2 main guys and a bunch of backup singers, while Deontay Johnson, he's been giving up 5.5 assists per game, only about 4 points per contest, but he's doing a good job flowing good, clean offense, and I do think that a clean offense is just enough for NC Central in there. So I total 156.5. I like the over and the points here with NC Central, 306.549, 306.550. Lehigh is on the road facing off against Marist. Marist is a favorite of 7.5 points. Total is between 130 to 130.5. 7 line at 7.5. So if we could get a 7 out there, and I'm seeing 1-7, I'd be willing to lay it with Marist, and if I absolutely had to play a 7.5, I would rather lay it than take it, because with this Marist squad, you know that they're going to be very rock solid down low. Last year, a top 25 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and with this Lehigh team, they are back outside the top 300 with regards to their rebound rate. So this should be a Marist team that wins from within. You bring in Rajon Blackwell, a guy that comes up from the non-D1 ranks, 14.5 points, 5 boards. He's been all sorts of versatile, and with him right now leading the way in terms of rebounding, you don't necessarily have that one alpha dog guy, but it's a whole is greater than some of his first approach. You've got Elijah Lewis back from season ago, where last year he gave the team about 11.5 points, 5 boards. He's doing the exact same thus far this season. You do lose someone at Josh Passarelli, who was a nice 3-point shooter, but Justin Bernard, he's been able to give you 4.5 assists per game. Jaden Collins, he's been in the program over the last few seasons. Not a guy that's going to give you a lot of 3-point shooting, but flows good, clean offense. For his career, 8.5 points, 4.5 boards, 3.5 assists, and that's what this Marist team is built around. Marist back outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game. Lehigh clocking in closer to about 250th, but a lot of that for Lehigh is because they have played against some super duper slow competition. You play against West Virginia, you play against Rutgers, teams like that, and I do think that they're going to be looking to bump up that tempo a little bit more, and they're going to be based around the backcourt because don't have a lot of size down low. You've got Hank Alvey, who's been able to give you about 10 points, 7 boards per contest. He's like the only guy that is above 6'8" that has seen meaningful minutes outside of Alfredo Adisa, who's a sort of project sophomore that just has not been able to flourish, but this year, Whitlock, Joshua Ingram, they've been pretty solid in the backcourt. Ingram has been able to give you 10 points per contest. He's able to haul in there about 5 rebounds per game and shooting over 40% from 3. Whitlock, he's able to shoot about 31% from 3. And this is a Lehigh team that last year did shoot over 35% from the outside. For Marist, they should see a lot of regression with the fact that they are allowing opponents to shoot 24.5% from 3-point range. Marist always good with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. They're more pedestrian with their 3-point shooting percentage. And I do think that a Lehigh team that they really don't rebound to save their lives are going to be looking at a bomb from the outside. And I do think that leads to a little bit of a higher scoring game. Did somebody told you here at 137.5. I think you might be close enough for late game felling. So like the over, and with Marist, we'll lay up to 7 with them. 306.551, 306.552. Setson is going to be playing us a Wright State. Wright State hopes to be the right side as they do find themselves as a 7.5 to an 8.5 point favorite total on this game. It is 151 to 151.5, and with Wright St. I did set them as a favorite of 5.5 points. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Stetson. It's a Wright St team that's really trying to turn over a new leaf. Like 2 seasons ago when they were under the tutelage of Scott Nagy, they were all gas, no brakes with regards to a really good offense and absolutely nothing whatsoever on defense. Now this is a Wright St team that has been much more respectable with their defense. Currently, teams are shooting 25.4% from 3 against them. That is certainly going to be going northward, but that said, they've been able to do a nice job being a top 75 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. The offense has taken half a step back, but they're still shooting 36% from 3 with bringing over Michael Cooper, who's been a non-D1 transfer that has really been able to blossom. 14 points, 3 assists, shooting 40% from 3-point range. You don't have a lot of holdovers from a season ago. You do have Michael Barajbe. Hopefully I said that correct. He's in year number 2 of the system. Last year, nice part-time starter with about 7 points, 5 rebounds per game. He's ascended to more like 11 points, 6 boards. Not a guy that's going to give you a lot of 3-point shooting, and this is a Wright State team that is going to be very much looking to pile drive the ball a little bit more down low than they have in past seasons. But that said, I do think that Stetson is going to be able to hold in there because I do think that we're going to see that regression with the Wright State 3-point shooting defense, and Stetson is a team that they're built around bombing it from 3. They've taken more 3-point shots than 2-point shots this season. You bring back Jamie Phillips, a double-figure score from a season ago. Right now, I'll give you 16-point shooting, 35.5% from 3, and Stetson's been a solid 3-point shooting team. They're shooting 37% from the outside. Alex Doyle's not going to continue to shoot 53% from 3-point range, but he has really been able to flourish in this system, was a little bit more of an ancillary role guy a season ago. He's been able to give you 8.5 points per game. Ethan Copeland has been able to give you 11 points per game. Now where the team loses the battles down low. This Stetson team is one of the worst teams in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They're always bad with regards to rebound percentage. That's just who this team is. Good news is they don't get their shot blocked. They're a top 5 team in terms of not getting their shot blocked, so they get good clean looks, but they haven't turned the ball over about 14.5 times per game, and when Stetson was actually at their peak, this was more of a slow and controlled team. They would typically be outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game. Right now, they're hovering right around about 146, so not fast, not slow. It's a Wright State team that has dialed things back a little bit more over the years themselves. They're about 186 in terms of total possessions per game, so this is a circumstance where I did set a total here of a 147.5. I'm in on the under, and I'm going to be able to take those points with Stetson. 306.553, 306.554. Ryder plays us at Coppin St. Coppin St is an 8.5-point underdog to this game between 142 to 142.5. With Ryder, I did set them as an 8.5-point favorite, so at an 8 or less, I'm going to be willing to lay with them. These are 2 teams that just cannot put it in the basket. Outside the top 350 are both of these teams in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. As a result, I set my total at a 138.5. I'm in on the under. Neither of these teams are necessarily going to be looking to fly. It feels like Coppin State is looking to go a little bit faster than they have in past seasons, but right now about 202nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, you've got a Ryder team that hits just sad. 267th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and yet I'm the schmuck that sets them as an 8.5-point favorite because at the very least, they've got a few holdovers in the backcourt from a season ago. Zion Cruz, Flash Burton, these 2 guys have been able to combine for about 22.5 points per contest. You have one guy on the roster that has attempted more than, I believe, 6 threes, that's shooting above 25% from the outside. That would be Cole McCabe. He's been able to give you 4 points, shooting 36% from 3. And you do have a main rebounder. Caleb Smith has actually been able to give you 7.5 rebounds per game, 6'5", a little bit of a do-it-all guy, and Coppin State is just getting absolutely blasted down low. This team does not have much size whatsoever for Coppin State. Right now, they do find themselves outside the top 300 in terms of rebound percentage. They're outside the top 300 in terms of 2-point shooting percentage, 3-point shooting percentage, ball control. It's just not good, to say the least. It's a whole bunch of red. You do have Khalil Horton back from season ago. He's been able to hear a who with 8.5 points per game, but right now you've got one guy giving you more than 4.5 rebounds per game, and 2 players giving you more than 4 rebounds per game, as Dementori Hall has been able to give you 10 points, 5.5 boards. He's been pretty rock solid there, but this team is just searching for an identity. They're searching for a point guard. You've been able to get about 3 assists per game out of Hassan Perkins, who he's been able to come over from Maryland Eastern Shore, give this team a little bit of direction, but he gives you absolutely no scoring whatsoever. I think that this is going to be a very sad offensive game, so I did set a line of an 8.5. We'll lay up to 8 here with Ryder. Set a total of 138.5, so I'm in on the under. 36.555, 36.556. Chicago State is on the road against Fort Wayne, and Fort Wayne does find themselves as a mid-tier favorite of 11.5 to 12 points on this game. It is 149.5 to 150. Set my line at 11.5. So 12 plus, that's my buy point on Chicago State. Chicago State has been a little bit more respectable here recently. I did set a total of a 161.5. I like the over, as Landon Busey does seem to have these boys running a little bit more with Chicago State in terms of total possessions per game, about 197th in the country. They typically have been a little bit more of a slow and controlled team, and We know that with this Fort Wayne team, they are not shy of running. With Fort Wayne last season, they were a top 75 team in terms of total possessions per game, and I don't think that they're going to quite get back to those heights this season, but still, it is a Fort Wayne team that has been a top 175 team in terms of total possessions per game, but both of these teams well outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, as you have a Fort Wayne team that they very much are built around generating turnovers, and they're back in the top 50 in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but they are well outside the top 310 in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. This Fort Wayne team has a nice holdover in the backcourt, and Corey Hednott, who's been able to lead the way, 17 points, shooting 35.5% from 3-point. And Fort Wayne, last year they were a top 55 team in terms of 3-point shooting percentage. You thought that they would take a step down, losing 3 of their top 4 scorers, but they should see a rise from the fact that they're shooting 30.5% from 3-point. DeAndre 3000 Craig comes over from Denver. He's been able to give you 15.5 points, 4 boards, 3 assists, 2 steals, bit of a do-it-all player. And then Mikkel Stevenson was very nice over at Grambling, should be able to give the team some defense, steal and a half, 13.5 points per contest. Team with a little bit less depth than in past years, but I do think that Maximus Nelson is going to be able to pick it up a little bit. But for Chicago State, they did take some of these SWAC All-Stars, and they've been able to do a nice job in terms of thriving here. Marcus Sankersley was that top scorer with Landon Busey over at Alcorn State, and he's ascended to be able to supply the team with 17 points per game. Now, Chicago State should see a rise with the fact that they're shooting 28% from 3, and outside the top 300 in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage as well, so that's been a little bit of an issue. But that's it for Chicago State after they were just absolutely blasted in their first games of the season. They've been a little bit more respectable here recently. Now, they got absolutely dumped by Iowa, but they hold in there against Minnesota. They really gave Loyola Chicago, or Illinois Chicago, a good run for their money as well, and I do think that this is going to be an offense that ascends because you've got a guy in CJ Ray who's been able to give you about 8 points per contest, 6'6", a little bit of a do-it-all player that comes on up from the non-D1 ranks. Braylon Bush, he was very solid over at Prairie View last season at Northwestern State. Before that, at Prairie View last season, gave that team 13.5 points. He actually shot from 3-point range about 41% from the outside, so reason to believe that you should be able to get some good looks for Chicago State. I do think that they're going to have a few too many turnovers in this game, as that's the specialty of Fort Wayne, but once they break through, I do think that they are going to do a nice job there, and they put teams on the free throw line. Chicago State does. They're inside the top 25 in terms of most fouls committed on a per possession basis. So they think you get high scoring games. That might total 161.5. I like the over, and I'm going to be willing to take Chicago State at a 12 plus. 36.557, 36.558. Penn State is playing against Boston U. Boston U is a double figure underdog here of 13.5 to 14.5 points. Total on this game between 143.5 to 144.5. Set a total of 141.5. I like the under. Penn State has traditionally been a top 75 team under Mike Rhodes in terms of total possessions per game. They're outside the top 225 right now. Boston U, they are always outside the top 300 in terms of their total possessions per game. Boston U, a really good team on the glass last year, a top 25 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They're not quite there yet, but I mean, they're on track for it. They're doing a nice job in terms of not allowing second and third chances, as you've got Malcolm Chemezi currently dealing with a little bit of an injury, so they've had a lot of guys just be able to step up around, as you've been able to get it right around about 4 rebounds and 12.5 points per game. Chase Glenn, I like what he's been able to bring to the table, and main guy for this team has been Ben Defty. He's been in the program for the last few seasons. A true 7-footer that was really more developing last season. He should be able to give this team quite a bit more down low than half a block from a season ago. He's been able to give you about 2 blocks per contest. Actually comes in from the country of Germany. And this has been a Boston U team that's been better with their 3-point shooting. Michael Air McNair last year shot 40% from 3, and he's built off of that. 13.5 points, 4 boards per contest, and they go up against Penn State team that typically their forte is being able to generate turnovers, but in this case this season it's been ball control. Penn State has actually been a top 20 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. They've been more pedestrian in terms of generating turnovers, and they've been really having it taken on the chin down low. They're outside the top 275 in terms of their opponent's 2-point shooting percentages. You just don't have a lot with regards to rebounding. Nobody on the team is giving you more than 4.3 rebounds per game. Now, I will say you've got 5 different guys with at least 3.8 rebounds per game, but they're still searching for that main man down low, whether that be Ivan Jurcic, who comes out over from overseas. He's given 8 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. And then when you take a look at the backcourt, your lead rebounder is actually your main facilitator and scorer, Caden Mingo. 14.5 points, 4 boards, 4 assists as a true freshman, but he's not really shooting it well from 3. You've had Miley Chunka off the ball be able to give you 14 points, and he's actually shooting 46% for 3. Freddie De Leon, main older from the season ago, he's been able to give you 14 points per game, but it's very clear that Mike Rhodes is trying to mix and match with this team, and I do think that Boston U and their overall rebounding going to be able to keep them lively in this game. I do think that this is going to be a lower scoring slog, semi-total 141.5. I like the under end with Boston U. Set them as a 13.5 point dog, so 14 plus going to be one thing to those points. 36.559, 36.560. It is Bellarmine, and they're going to be playing against East Christian. This is a neutral court game out there, I believe, from the Citadel's camp. campus, and this is a game that's off the board because Bellarmine played yesterday, and I've got my handicap, as I did set Houston Christian as a favorite of 9 points. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 8.5 with them, 9.5 or more, taking the points with Houston Christian. And then I set a total where at 144.5 or less, I'm in on the over, 145.5 or higher, the under. As for Bellarmine, it's been a case where this team has been just brutal on defense. Now, they held the Citadel to shooting 3 of 24 from 3, not honestly because of their great defense, it's because the Citadel can't hit a shot to save their lives, and Bellarmine entered into yesterday second worst in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, so this Houston Christian team should be able to find some success there. Bellarmine actually shot well above 45% from 3 yesterday after they were shooting 30% from 3 coming in. You do have a guy in Jack Karzinski who's been able to give you over 18 points per game at 6'9" He's been able to shoot it well from 3, and I do think that you're going to be able to get quite a bit moving forward out of Miles Watkins, a guy that's been around the block, and he last season was a pretty rock solid guy for the team up until yesterday. Had yet to really be able to take those strides forward, and on the other end, you've got a Houston Christian team that under Craig Doty, year number 1 of him, they really did a nice job in terms of slowing things down. They were outside the top 275 in terms of total possessions per game. They had to flip over quite a bit of that roster from the season ago, and as of right now, they have played against 2 non-D1 teams. That does warp their numbers a little bit, but in their most recent game against Louisiana Monroe, held up there, and you've been able to have Kylan Green come in and do a little bit of everything for the team. He's given you 11 points, 6 boards, 7 assists. He was over at Utah Valley last season where he was unable to see a ton of minutes for them, and he's been sort of that do-it-all sort of guy. You do have a holdover in DeAndre Samuels, who last season in a more sixth-man role, 7 points per game, shot in the high 30s from 3-point range, but that's not necessarily going to be the forte of this Houston Christian team. Now, they should be better than shooting 25% from 3-point range. You bring in a guy in DeMarco Bethea, who he spent some time in the Southland over at East Texas A&M last season. Pretty solid player, 7 points, 4 boards, 6'7", a little bit of a bowling ball style guy that is going to hold things down low, but I do think that just being able to have Trent Johnson out there to be able to give you a bit of direction, doing a bit of everything, comes on over from the country of Canada and Idaho State. He's in year number 2 of the system, giving the team 12 points, 4.5 boards, 3 assists. That takes it out of a Bellarmine team that just, frankly, has been brutal with regards to their defense. This is a Houston Christian team that should be able to win down low, especially with Mara giving you about 2.5 blocks per contest, and I do think the Bellarmine is going to need to hoist away from 3, and I do think that Houston Christian going to do a nice job in terms of guarding the arcs. Set a total here of a 144.5 or less to the over, 145.5 or higher the under. I just think that the Bellarmine defense is that inefficient, and 108 to 8.5 with Houston Christian, 9 or more, taking the points with Bellarmine. 306-561, 306-562. Maryland Eastern Shore is going to be playing us Hampton. Hampton does find themselves as a road favorite with regards to my projection, as you've got pair teams that played yesterday, so we've got to go to my handicap. I set Hampton as a 6-point favorite, 108 to 5.5 with them, 6.5 or more, taking the points with Maryland Eastern Shore. And set a total of a 134, 133.5 or less, in on the over, 134.5 or higher, the under for Maryland Eastern Shore. The defense has actually been halfway decent for them. Problem is, they're currently dead second last in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, so that's been all sorts of brutal for them. And for Maryland Eastern Shore, you've got one guy that's giving you over 8.1 points per game, Joseph Lucardo, who's been able to do a nice job, about 10.5 points, 4 rebounds per game. You also just don't have a lot of rebounding with this Maryland Eastern Shore team, even though they bring back Christopher Flippin. Last year, he gave the team about 5 rebounds per game. He's down to about 6 points, 3.5 boards. He's actually regressed from a season ago, and then you're looking to just mix and match right now in the backcourt. They're looking to someone in Dorian Staples, who went down to the 91 ranks, was at SIU Edwardsville, trying to give the team a little bit of something. They have a 91 level transfer in Zion Obelan, who's been able to give you 7.5 points, 4.5 boards, and it's just not a ton there, and Hampton should be able to win that battle down low. I do like the versatility of Xavier Long, who last year gave the team 6.5 points, 6.5 boards, and at 6'7", shot in the mid-30s from 3-point range. Problem with this Hampton team is that they just don't have a lot of outside shooting themselves. They're shooting less than 30% from 3-point range. You bring in Jaquel Gaines-Wyatt, who was over at Alcorn State a season ago. For that team, he was able to supply about 11.5 points. He shoots in the mid-30s from 3-point range, 3 assists per contest, and then you've been able to get good production out of Daniel Johnson. He's in year number 2 of the system, 12 points, 5 boards, so he at 6'5", has been able to do a nice job with his shiftiness. It's a Hampton team that last year was really good at being able to generate second and third chances, back in the top 125 in terms of percentage of missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, but we're also noticing this Hampton team really slowing down with regards to their tempo as well. Currently, they're 339th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. I do think that they're going to be able to dominate the glass. I do think that for Maryland Eastern Shore, a team that's been pretty solid in general, generating turnovers. They do so against a Hampton backcourt that's been a little bit more shaky, so 5.5 or less one lay with Hampton, 6.5 or more taking the points with the Shore, and then 133.5 or less in on the over, 134.5 or higher the under. 365.63, 365.64. Florida Gulf Coast is going to be playing us to Rice. We give our ode to Lane Kiffin. Go Owls. This is a game that's presently off the board, but I've got my handicap. I did set Rice as a 1.5 point favorite. Going to be one to lay up to 1 with them, 2 or more taking the points with Dunk City, and then set a total of 147.5. 147 or less in on the over, 148 or higher the under. This is a Florida Gulf Coast team that last year they were outside the top 340 in terms of total possessions per game, and they're just not the same team defensively that they were a season ago. Like, I had to make a big adjustment with regards to Florida Gulf Coast because they're just not doing a great job there. They're up to about 133rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Going into yesterday, Rice was about 244th in terms of total possessions per game. Kennesaw State is a very up-tempo team, and that game went to overtime, so now their metrics are a little bit more warped, but I do think that Rice is going to be able to do a good job holding up at the point of attack down low because Tristan Goulette is right now for Florida Gulf Coast giving you about 4 to 5 rebounds per game. Saw some nice minutes in the CBI last season, but they do take a step down with losing so many of their big men for past seasons, so I do think that someone like a Jimmy Odekul, who's been able to give you 5.5 rebounds per game, Andrew Akuchi, who's been able to give you about 4.5, 5 boards per contest, that they're going to be able to win that battle down low, and I do like the trio in the backcourt. Jalen Smith, Nick Anderson, Trey Borneau. These three guys have been able to combine for right around about 42 to 43 points per contest. Not going to be an amazing three-point shooting team, but they're a bit improved from a season ago, and last year they were outside the top 300 in terms of ball security. They've done a nice job in terms of cleaning up their act on that front as well. And then with this Florida Gulf Coast team, it's a lot of just turnover with regards to this team. The backcourt has been relatively solid as you've been able to get about 17 points per game out of J.R. Kozinski. He comes on over from Notre Dame and was a relatively good player for them 2 years ago as well. For Dunk City, they're shooting about 32% from three-point range. That's why they're not necessarily Splash City, and they've been able to do a great job taking care of the ball. They're only turning the ball over about 9 times per game. This is with George Washington III, who began his career over at Michigan. Not really giving you a ton, but you're going to be relying upon your Ramir Barmo along with Jordan Ellerby to really be able to pick it up. Barno has been able to give you about 5 assists per contest. Ellerby, he's able to give you about 11 points per contest, and he's come in as a true freshman and has been able to really spark this team. He comes in from the great state of Pennsylvania. That's where Patrick Chambers, who used to be at Penn State, really does a lot of his recruiting. But that said, I do think that with this Rice team, they do a nice job in terms of being able to take care of the ball against a Dunk City team that's not generating as many turnovers. And Florida Gulf Coast has really taken a step back down low. Rice is just 2-5 straight up, but I mean, they had a close call against Kennesaw State. They hung in there against Oregon. I think that that's a little bit misleading, and I do like Rice here as a favorite. I set them at 1.5, 1 to lay up to 1 with them. 2 or more taking the points with Florida Gulf Coast, 147 or less, and on the over, 148 or higher the under. 365.65, 365.66. Central Arkansas is going to be playing us to Eastern Illinois. Eastern Illinois does find themselves here as a 2.5 point underdog. 139 to 139.5 is the total line with Eastern Illinois. I did set them as a 1.5 point underdog, so here at the 2+, I'm going to be willing to take those points. Central Arkansas coming off of just completely blasting Eastern Washington a few days ago, and it's a Central Arkansas team that's much better than they have been in the past. I do give credit to John Schulman and all that he's doing, and getting back Cameron Hunter, who during the 2022-23 season gave the team 16 plus points per contest. He then spent a year injured last year at Wisconsin, just wasn't able to get out there on the floor. He has returned, and he's been able to give the team 15 points in some nice direction. Now for Central Arkansas, you just don't have a ton down low. You don't have a single guy in the roster that's giving you over 5 rebounds per game, but even with that, they're not allowing teams to be able to grab second chances themselves. Right now, they've been a top 175 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Now their three-point shooting is off. They're shooting less than 30% from three-point range, but in the backcourt, you've been able to get some good production out of Javion Guy King. He's never been a great three-point shooter, but after he missed all of last season due to injury, 8.5 points, 4 boards per contest. You've got Ty Robinson, who he was with injury last year. He's been able to get the team about 11 points per game. So a lot of guys have just been banged up and have really costed Central Arkansas in past years. They have returned, but Eastern Illinois is typically a team that does a nice job in terms of generating turnovers, and I do like what they've got down low. A 6'6", a little bit of a do-it-all guy in Cooper Jacoby, who's been able to give you 11 points, 6 boards last year, was a mid-30s three-point shooter, and then Zion Brewster, he's dealt with a little bit of injury. He's been able to get the team right around about 16 points per contest. Looks like he should be all good to go in this game. He was missing more towards the early part of the season, and in their games against non-D1 teams, they were just resting him when they had a little bit of a breather there, but that's a Preston Turner down for what if Brewster cannot go. He's probably going to be the head of the snake for this team in the backcourt, and he's been pretty solid with giving the team about 11 points per game, a little bit more of an off-the-ball scorer, typically shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range, and for this Eastern Illinois team, they are generating about 12.5 turnovers per game. They themselves have had a tough time taking care of the ball, and they're not going to give you a lot of second and third chances, but they're allowing teams to shoot less than 30% from 3-point. So I do think that's going to be a struggle for both of these teams to be able to get online with regards to their 3-point shooting. Central Arkansas hovering right around about 100th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. They've slowed down a little bit from past years, but it's not like they're playing at a snail's pace. You've got an Eastern Illinois team that's more around about 275th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but I do think that both of these teams see a little bit of positivity with their 3-point shooting. Think that you get some late game fouling as well. So I'm in on the over, and with 2+, I'm going to be 136 points with Eastern Illinois, and did set my total at a 146.5, 365.67, 365.68. Austin P is going to be playing us in Northern Illinois. Northern Illinois is a underdog of 7.5 points, 146.5 to 147 is the total line with Austin P. I did set them as a favorite of 8.5 points, so I am going to be willing to take a shot on them, willing to lay up to 8 with Austin P. They're doing a nice job slowing things down outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game, and they bring back two big pieces from a season ago. Anton Brookshire, who's been more of a just do-it-all sort of guard, who's been able to give 8 points per game, and then Tate McCubbin, 6'8", do-it-all guy that last year, 13 points, 6 boards. He's been able to shoot in the mid-30s from 3-point. He's been rock solid. They did lose their top guy from the season ago in LJ Thomas, but they've replaced him with a few different guys. You've got Tyree Collins, who's been able to supply the team with about 14 points per game, and then Colin Parker comes on up from the non-D1 ranks, 6'8", nice 35% 3-point shooter, 13 points, 5.5 rebounds. Really like his size as a wing for this team, and they should get more rebounding moving forward, as Rashad Marshall last season over at Arkansas State gave that team 5+ rebounds per game. He's been relatively silent to begin the season, but Austin P has been improving game by game with regards to that rebounding, and for this Austin P team, they've been a top 35 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and this is a Northern Illinois team that they've had a tough time in all facets of basketball, and they just have never been able to do a great job on the glass last year outside the top 320 in terms of offensive rebound percentage. They are back there this year. Now, they're not allowing opponents to grab a lot of second and third chances, but they leave something to be desired down low. They're right now shooting 41% from 3, and I think that they're going to be a better 3-point shooting team with bringing in Jai Otika. Go back like 3 years ago over at Marist, he was shooting 40% for 3, 15+ points per contest, but I do think that Dylan Dukaman, who's been coming in and has been absolutely tremendous, coming over from Switzerland, he's played 2 games, but he's given the team 36 points. We should see a little bit of regression there, and in terms of guys that have played every game, Mekhi Valentine, who comes on over after he began his career over at Missouri State last season. He should be able to give this team a little bit of a spark as well. He's right now giving you 12 points, 6 boards, shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range. Again, with Northern Illinois, we'll see a little bit of regression with that 3-point shooting, especially against an Austin P team that has been a top 175 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Austin P very much basing themselves around defense, but with the way that this Northern Illinois team outside the top 335 down low in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, I do think that Austin P gets the job done. Northern Illinois, top 100 team in terms of total possessions per game, so set a total of 142.5. I think that Austin P looks to slow it down in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Austin P 3 of 65.69, 365.70. Missouri is going to be playing us to South Carolina State. South Carolina State 32.5 to 33.5 point dogs. 161.5 is the total end for Missouri. I did set them as a 39-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. South Carolina State got down 18 points in their last game against South Dakota. They really rallied back. They lose that game by 1, but this is still a team that's well outside the top 275 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. Their main 10 rotation guys last year, they lose pretty much all but 2. You bring back James Merrill, who's been able to give you 8 points per contest, and you've been able to have Cameron Clark, who's a 6'10" big man over at Cal State Bakersfield. He comes in from there, and he's given this team a little bit of a spark, 12 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. He was missing towards the beginning part of the season, so they've been a little bit more respectable since he's been out there on the floor. But still, it is a team that's really not doing a great job in terms of their outside shooting. You've been able to get a little bit of facilitation out of Jaden Johnson, one of the main holdovers from the season ago, 3.5 assists per game, but his team shoots about 32% from 3-point, 64% at the free throw line, and out of 365 Division I teams with their 2-point shooting percentage, they are 365th. And then you've got a Missouri team that has a lot more size than in pass. You've got Javon Porter, who comes on over, and his brother is Michael Porter, so connections there, giving 8 points, 5 boards. You've got just a lot of guys that are bombing it from 3. I don't think that they're going to continue to shoot 45% from the outside, but this is a South Carolina State team that's really given it up from the perimeter. You've got Gene Sona, former 20-point per game scorer over at Detroit. He's flourished here, 13 points, 4.5 boards, and then Mark Mitchell is just a guy that at 6'8", he does it all. 3 assists, 18.5 points, 6 boards. Now he really doesn't pop it from 3, but Jacob Cruz, he shoots 61% from 3-point range. And then those main guards, Sebastian Mack, Anthony Robinson, they've both been able to give you about 13 points per game with having about 3.5 assists per contest out of Robinson as well. So they've been able to do a good job flowing good, clean offense. Missouri's not generating as many turnovers as they have in the past, but they're an improved rebounding team as well, as they've been able to grab some nice offensive rebounds. Right now, Missouri is a a top 100 team with regards to rebound percentage. It's by far the best under the Dennis Gates system, and I do think that they take it to the South Carolina State team. Semi-line at a 39. I'm going to be one to lay with them. I just don't think that South Carolina State does their part with the total. Set mine at a 159. I'm in on the under. 365.71, 365.72. You've got Mississippi Valley State on the road against Texas A&M. A&M is now a 41.5 to 42.5 point favorite. Throughout this game between 151.5 to 152.5, and I do like the over. I did set my total at a 160.5. Mississippi Valley State last year was the worst team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis by about 8 points per 100 possessions. They're no longer dead last, and they're about 343rd in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis after they were dead last season. So little wins for this Mississippi Valley State team, who played very well on the island about a week or so ago. They held in there against Utah Tech. They held in there against Manhattan, covered against Hawaii, and you've got a real guy here, Michael James, who's been very good. 19 points, 3.5 boards, 3.5 assists per contest, and Daniel Mayfield at 6'8", he's pulling in their 7 rebounds per game. Mississippi Valley State hasn't had anyone pulling their rebounds in recent years, so that's been helpful. Still a team that's shooting 29% for 3. They're still turning the ball over 15 times per game, and Texas A&M, with this Bucky McMillan style, they're certainly going to be able to generate those turnovers. It's still a Texas A&M team that's still trying to figure out what they exactly have. As Ruben Dominguez has actually been their top scorer with about 15 points per game. You've had a pair of guys in Riley Griffin along Josh Holloway, both give you about 3.5 assists per game. Neither are what I would consider to be like a main facilitator, though. You've got Rashawn Agee, give you about 7 rebounds per game. They've been essentially playing like 9 or 10 different guys for at least 13.5 minutes per game. Frederico, so nice they named him twice. He's been rock solid down low, but Pop Isaacs has not really been able to find it here. 8.5 points and assists and a half per contest. So, he just has not been able to find that role. Ali Abdu-Diba, who joined the program late, he has not been able to find a lot of minutes as well. So, for this Texas A&M team, it's a lot of transition. And right now, they're allowing opponents to shoot over 40% from 3. That should be going downward. That's just a bad mark, and it should be experiencing a little bit of regression, but that's it for Texas A&M. Are they going to be able to absolutely blast this Mississippi Valley State team down low? Yes, but I think that Mississippi Valley State is a little bit more respectable. They hold in there at Mississippi Valley State after they were outside the top 275 in terms of total possessions per game. They're in the top 100 this year, so they're looking to play quite a bit more up tempo. In this case, I did set Mississippi Valley State as a 40.5 point underdog, so won't take the 42 plus, and I'm going to be in on the over where I wrap things up with 306.573, 306.574. Nebraska is going to be playing against Winthrop, and Winthrop does find themselves as a 16 to a 16.5 point dog. 165.5 is the total line. I did set my line here at a 158 with regards to the total. I'm in on the under with this Winthrop team. They are very much looking to play up tempo. Last season, they were a top 40 team in terms of total possessions per game, and right now they're checking in more around about 119th. You've got a Nebraska team that I think when it's all said and done, they're going to be a relatively mid-tempo team, about 106th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but with Nebraska, top 75 unit in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're not generating for themselves a lot of offensive rebounds, but they're still doing a good job winning the rebound battle with Rink Mass back after he was missing last season. 16 points, 6 boards at 6'9", shooting 39% from 3, and it's a Nebraska team that has really scaled back on the amount of counter-accession that they're using, and that's a good thing because Jamarcus Lawrence, who's a boomerang transfer coming back from Rhode Island, 10.5 points, he's shooting 50% from 3. Again, should be going downward, but Bryce Samford has been tremendous coming in from Iowa, 16.5 points, 4 boards, 3 assists, 6'6", a little bit of a do-it-all sort of wing guy for this team, a bit of a point forward, and you've also been able to get 4 assists per game out of Sam Hoiberg for a Nebraska team that is doing a good job winning the turnover battle, top 150 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, and Winthrop really thrives on getting to the free throw line. This is a Nebraska team that's been a top 20 team in terms of fewest free throws allowed on a per possession basis, so that's going to greatly hurt this Winthrop team that last year was in the top 10 in terms of free throw rate. Now for this Winthrop team, now they're looking to really bomb it from three-point as well. They're taking about 29 threes per game with Kareem Rozier coming over from Duquesne. He's been shooting 43.5% from 3, 14 points, 4.5 assists per game. And Dalen Berry, the transfer from Charleston Southern, 14.5 points. He's been able to give you about 5 boards per game as well, but for this bunch in Winthrop, you just don't have the size that you had a season ago when you had Colton Tolford and company. Logan Duncombe, who he began his career as a top 150 recruit over at Indiana, he's been able to give you about 4.5 rebounds per game, and do you think that there's upside with Joshua Mio? He comes on over from Coastal Carolina, where he was giving that team about 8.5 points, shot about 32% for 3. He's doing the same for this program as well, but Winthrop throughout the years has always had a very difficult time in terms of being able to guard the three-point line themselves. There are line teams that shoot in the mid-30s from 3, but I think that might be cropping up again. Good news for Winthrop, much better at taking care of the ball. They've been a top 50 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, but I do think that the overall active hands of Nebraska takes it out of them a little bit. I do think that Winthrop does defense just enough to be able to cover, but I do think that this is going to be a little bit more of a defense-oriented game than the total would indicate. I set my line at a 14.5. We'll take those points with Winthrop. Set my total 158.5. I like the under as well, and that'll wrap things up for the Tuesday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. A big thanks to Riley Frain. He does great work over at Mid-Major Madness. He joined me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from his fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we have fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @G_81. Keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review, and I'm with you guys every single day on this podcast with picks and analysis on every game, every day, so I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.